Hey, race fans, Hall of Famer Darrell Waltrip here. You know it's time to drop the green flag on another edition of Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic. So, hey, pull those belts tight one more time. Here's my buddy Hermie Sadler and Senator Bill Stanley. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's see what they have to say, boys and girls.
I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right all the way into the wall around turn 3 and 4, heading to home, trying to make the playoffs.
And I'm former just about anything you can imagine, Hermie Sadler. And I'm turning left, I think. Well, I'm also leaning right, but I'm also turning left.
You're both. You're both.
Yeah.
And this is Leaning Right.
I go both ways.
Okay. This is Leaning Right, Turning Left, and Wrecking Out of Control with Sadler and the Senator, sponsored by Pace-O-Matic.
That's right, Senator Stanley. And Pace-O-Matic is an entertainment company which develops gaming software that players love to play and can use their skills to win every single time. Plus, these games of skill provide vital revenue to keep family-owned businesses like bars, restaurants, convenience stores, and truck stops alive, Senator, especially in a trying time like we're in, not only trying to recover from a pandemic, but facing unprecedented, at least in my business lifetime, inflation, rising cost, rising labor cost. Every challenge you can imagine are being thrown at small businesses, and these games for a lot of small businesses that you and I are representing in our lawsuit against the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's really been a lifeline to them, and I hear from them every day, as I'm sure you do.
Absolutely, and we're proud to have Pace-O-Matic as our primary sponsor here on this podcast, also on our cars on SS Racing, which we'll talk about today. Today's podcast, the episode, is really going to focus around the Martinsville races, the Thursday night Wheeling race, the weekend races, both Xfiniti and Cup. We're going to talk a little bit about the lawsuit, talk a little bit about politics, but mostly we're going to talk about racing today. We're going to do this a little bit different and really make the focus. And one of the great things that we're going to have in the second segment today is that New College Institute out of the city of Martinsville, of which I am the chairman of the board of directors. On Tuesday night before the races, we had a panel discussion about the history of racing in Martinsville, and especially at the Martinsville Speedway. We recorded that. It's an excellent interview with some great people we'll introduce you to. They tell some great stories. It's something you're going to really want to listen to. So that's going to be our second half of this podcast episode. After we talk about the races in Martinsville, talk about our race at the Wheeling Race Open Wheel Modified, and Sadler Stanley Racing had 2 cars out there. We'll talk about that as well. And I think we'll talk about a little bit of the lawsuit. This is now Wednesday, November 2nd. Unfortunately, we're not together. We were together yesterday, but we were supposed to be together because we were supposed to be in the circuit court for for the county of Greensville on your case, Sadler Brothers Oil versus the Commonwealth of Virginia. But instead, I'm here actually not at the Mothership Stanley Law Group conference room studio. I'm at the sponsor of your Turning Left Moments office in her conference room at the Vista Installations office just down the street from my office in Moneta, Virginia, because we started to record this podcast and everything crapped out on us, and it's due to my piss-poor internet service at the Stanley Law Group. So, so we're starting over.
That's what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
Can we do that again?
Yeah, that was good. It was really good. You've had a lot of practice.
Yeah.
That's really good. But this is
I
better
waited
internet. So hopefully it's going to go well.
Only because I love you, I waited 30 extra minutes on Eastern Stanley time for you to start the show. And then we got 15 minutes into the show. And in case you didn't hear it, the show went. So then I had to wait for y'all to load up, pack up, and go to the office of my sponsor, Laura Stanley Vista Installations, who, by the way, is a stellar window and door installation outfit, but more importantly is babysitting a 27-year trial attorney and politician.
You know, here we go again. I have to depend on Laura to even get this podcast up and running. She's
not even there.
She's not even here. She's out of town. She's doing store visits as the owner of this company. She goes down to the Lowe's in North Carolina and visits with the regional managers and finds out what their concerns are, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. She's really hands-on, so I give it to her. But she left me with the kids. And, so you and I were in Richmond yesterday, drove up. She left early in the morning. I took the kids to school, drove up, drove back, got the kids. They were very self-sufficient. They'd made their own dinner, so I didn't have to. And but then I had to get them up this morning, get them going again, and then, she comes back Thursday. And so I really appreciate all the things that she does, because in a microcosm of 2 days, she does what I think is this huge rigmarole. She does it every day. So hats off to your primary sponsor, Laura Stanley from Vista Installation. So we were in Richmond yesterday. We were supposed to be in Richmond yesterday. We're supposed to be over the whole weekend prepping for your trial that was supposed to start today, but it has not started today, has it?
It has not, and that's kind of been a frustrating thing for me. You and I, from the beginning, have wanted to get this case to trial to try and get some fairness, some fair government towards small businesses. This whole thing is about casinos wanting a monopoly on skill games, and unfortunately the Commonwealth of Virginia is acquiescing, I guess, to some of the outside interest that is pushing for the casinos, but nevertheless we're fighting for small business. We want to get this thing to trial so we can hopefully get a permanent, fair resolution for small businesses and their skill games and how those games fit into the growing gaming market in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But we get delays thrown at us, Bill, just about at every turn. And we were in court last week on some pre-trial hearings and motions, and the trial seemed to the court kind of took a left turn and started honing in on a couple subject items of our lawsuit. And so now we're in a little bit of a holding period, and I'll let you explain kind of what those issues are that we're getting ready to write to the court about, and then we go back to court for those rulings on December the 5th, and then from there we'll get additional information on trial dates and things of that nature.
That's exactly right. And so for those that have been listening, those already know. We have a lot of listeners that ask us questions about this. To give you a status update, for those that are tuning in maybe for the first time, we're involved in a lawsuit against the Commonwealth of Virginia, who's trying to ban skill games like skee ball, crane games that when you put in money and try to pick out a stuffed animal or a prize, and even video skill games, which we find in our truck stops, bars, restaurants, and convenience stores, which have been legal for many, many years. But all of a sudden, when the casinos came into the Commonwealth of Virginia, they didn't want any competition, so they tried to make skill games illegal through a ban language, SB 971. We filed a lawsuit stopping that ban. We won. We were victorious. That injunction that was granted was, of course, temporary and then set for trial, which was supposed to be today on November 2nd. When we got to the hearing, the judge really was focusing on two issues. They had filed demurs, pleas, and bars, the AG's office had. Instead of trying to get to trial, the AG's office has been obfuscating, in my opinion. They've not answered discovery. They're dragging their feet. All of a sudden, they have 3 expert witnesses that we must depose prior to trial. They file demurs. They file plea and bars. They want to do anything they can but get to court, it seems to me. And so the judge focused on the plea and bar part. A plea and bar is basically the Commonwealth says you can't bring this case. And their argument was this case should be dismissed because we enjoy sovereign immunity. You can't sue the state. I argued that of course you can sue the state for an unconstitutional law. Otherwise, every law that was passed would never be challenged. We wouldn't need an appellate court. The court agreed with me and said there is no sovereign immunity. But then the two issues that it did kind of focus on, the court did, were whether or not by putting language into the budget, what we call the budget rider, trying to ban skill games again in a newfangled but more confusing way, they were putting legislation changing the criminal code without fair hearing before committees, without public input. It was an 11th hour backroom deal with casinos, it seems to me. And so they put it into the budget, and we say in our pleadings that violates a constitutional provision protection in the Virginia Constitution called the single object rule, which means, in a nutshell, when you have a bill like it's a budget bill, it's supposed to engage a single object, a law that it's trying to pass or something it's trying to repeal. It can't have multiple objects. It prevents what's called log rolling, where people attach legislation that otherwise would not pass onto the budget bill because you have to vote for the budget bill as a whole. You can't pull it out and argue it separately. It doesn't go through committees. It's a backdoor way of trying to get legislation passed that might not be successful. And certainly this legislation as it's written and then put into the budget would not have been successful in last year's General Assembly session. So we say that when you're changing the criminal law, you don't do it in the budget. And if you're trying to do it in the budget, you're violating the single object rule of Virginia's Constitution. The second issue that the judge really was looking at and wants us to brief now is whether the new budget rider language banning skill games actually bans free speech, which we said it did, the original 971, so that's where we won, that they're impinging on the rights of free speech and the interaction between the game player and the video game itself, which conveyed a message. It's protected under the United States Supreme Court's prior decisions. Now the judge says, well, does the new language now only prohibit content? And if it prohibits content, that is, restricts free speech, then it's unconstitutional? Or is it merely restraining conduct of the individual user, thereby not violating free speech? So those are the two issues that we're briefing right now. Yesterday, Hermie and I traveled up to Richmond. We were supposed to be there, as I said, for many days before, but we went up and had a meeting with our crack legal team, and we sat down and worked through the issues and some of the positions that we have to take, and whether we thought one argument was good or not good or how we were going to phrase these things. We felt very confident. I think we have an exceptional argument to make. The Commonwealth has not proven in its plea and bar, as its burden is, that these lawsuits, this new amended lawsuit of ours, which was supposed to go to trial today, shouldn't be brought. So I feel very confident about what we're doing. Our team's working very hard. We're a little disappointed that we didn't go to trial today because I think we would have won, but it's delaying the trial. I don't think it's stopping the trial, but there is good news about the injunction itself. And why don't you tell our listeners about that, Hermie?
Well, yeah, I'll say one other thing too before I get to what the judge said about our injunction, because that's the first question everybody asks. Of course, they want to see how we're doing and what the fight is, but the main thing they want to ask is, are we allowed to, does the injunction stay in place during these proceedings? Which the answer to that is yes. The judge said from the bench that as we prepare to go back on December the 5th, that the current injunction would roll on, continue to and through December the 5th, is what he said. But one thing that made me think about, Bill, while you were chatting, that you and I and our team have been really pushing to try to get this to trial as quickly as possible. The Commonwealth is throwing in, like you say, demurs, plea and bars, now experts and this and that and the other. But let me tell you what's going to happen. If we get to a point where we're not able to get this case tried before you go back in session for the General Assembly, then the people that want to kill us are going to say that Senator Stanley was the one that was delaying and tried to get it through trial because you cannot, as an attorney, can't try a case while you're in General Assembly. So you want to bet that they don't turn the tables and blame you for if we get a delay through the General Assembly?
Well, I guess they can. I mean, it would be pretty lame on their parts, but we were trying to get this case tried actually in May, but it was the forces against us that delayed the budget and then snuck it in right on Memorial Day weekend and then had us come back within 48 hours to vote on it. And we had to vote up or down on the budget. We couldn't vote just on that skill game ban, the tricky change in the criminal code that they snuck into the budget. So that wasn't our fault. And so we said to the court, hey, we need to delay this trial, continue the injunction, see what happens in the budget because we might have new issues. Well, lo and behold, not only do we have the old issue that we had won on once already previously, we now had this new language, the budget rider ban of skill games in the budget. So we moved the court date to November. We filed an amended complaint. instead of answering the complaint. We didn't even change the counts. We just added new information and language pertaining to the budget rider skill game ban attempt in the budget. And what does the Commonwealth do? They demur. And demur tests the sufficiency of the pleadings, whether they're on notice of what the claims are, which had been overruled before in the first original complaint. They claimed sovereign immunity, which I argued that the government of the Commonwealth of Virginia did not enjoy sovereign immunity because, simply put, you can sue on unconstitutional acts that are passed that affect you, as we talked about. And, finally, they filed this plea in bar. And so with the judge kind of honing down on those two issues, we've had to move off this court case. We wanted to go to trial. It didn't seem like the government wanted to go to trial, but we were doing everything we could to pack this all in so we'd be in court right now arguing your case before the circuit court. They can say it's me because, look, if the judge rules as we hope and think he will in our favor, then unless we squeak this thing in before January 11th, we're going to have to wait. It's a 14-hour day down there in the General Assembly when you're working, and you work your butt off if you're doing your job right, which I do every day for the people in my district. And so, this thing's not going to go off until March, April. And so they can try to blame me, but I wanted this thing done. They're the ones playing games, not us. We want to go to trial. We want our rights vindicated. We want to put on a court case. They seem to want to do everything else but.
Well, it's been frustrating, but the fight continues. You and I talk just about every day about it, the importance of it, not only in regards to skill games and the revenue for these small businesses, but the precedent that it could potentially set, that the government can pick and choose winners and losers and who can operate what type of business based on lobbyists and based on influence in the general. It opens up a whole can of worms and sets an awful precedent, not to mention the fact that it circumvents, in my opinion, the free market system. Competition makes businesses better. We compete every day. You in your private law practice, you compete every day. People have choices when they want to hire an attorney. And if you work harder or work smarter, provide better service, better attention to your clients, and get better results, you got a better chance to get more clients. If the government came in one day and said, Mr. Stanley, the attorney that works next door to the office next door, he's got now a license from the General Assembly, from the Commonwealth of Virginia. He's the only one that can practice law in this particular county. Have a great day. It's just, it sounds far-fetched, but to me, what they're doing to small businesses is far-fetched. They should allow all businesses to compete in a free enterprise, free market system, capitalism, and let people decide who deserves their money and where they should spend their money. And I know people that listen to this podcast have probably heard me say it 1,000 times. It just befuddles me how not let alone a legislator in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but how anybody would want to in any way be a part of a scheme that is asking the government to provide an unlevel playing field for small businesses against casinos. But we're going to continue to fight. We've got like you mentioned, a great legal team that understands that we're fighting for something way bigger than just skill games in convenience stores. We're fighting for the free market. We're fighting for free enterprise. And you brought my attention to a couple things last night, Bill, about some of the potential long-term lasting effects of our trial, what it could mean 5, 10, 15 years from now.
It's big. The court said this is an extraordinary case, and I told you that. It really is. I mean, what we're seeking now is to control and limit the government's ability to change our lives, to restrict our freedoms, or to create criminal code sections that create penalties that could deprive us of our liberty and keep them from doing it in a way that is behind the scenes in the smoke-filled rooms, but rather maintaining and challenging the government to maintain that any law that is passed must be proposed, debated, allowed for public input, and voted upon, and must follow the regular process that ensures a representative democracy only passes laws that are in the best interest of the citizens that it serves. That is a big deal. And it's free speech. You know, we're having a free speech discussion going on right now because if you don't think that the government is trying to limit your free speech, you only have to look to that bombshell report that came out just recently where it has been said that the government colluded with platforms like Facebook and Twitter to restrict what they deemed to be disinformation. But that disinformation was anything negative about the COVID vaccines, anything about negative about elections, anything that might be construed to be against the government's position from the January 6th riots. Whatever, they were colluding to restrict people's free speech or access to free speech on those platforms. Either I couldn't say something that I don't agree with the COVID vaccine, I would get erased or banned. And that way it helped the government's narrative. You better believe, ladies and gentlemen, that the government is out to restrict your free speech. If you don't, then you're naive, because that's why the First Amendment's there. Because a government necessarily wants to control the people's speech, or negate any negative publicity or speech that's against the government or what it's doing. And so in this case, that's exactly what the government is trying to do. They're trying to limit free speech and that interaction of free speech through a video game, skill game, between the player and the game itself and the owner-operator, and restrict that owner-operator's free speech and ability to do their business because they've picked winners and losers. They've gone with the casino and then colludes with the government colludes with the casino because they're going to make money, generate revenues, tax revenues. But we got to get rid of these pesky skill games. And so what we'll do is we'll limit their speech. So these are very extraordinary indeed issues that will have ramifications in the Commonwealth of Virginia, not just for skill games or convenience stores now or in the little bit of future. This will be a case, quite frankly, Hermie, that people are going to discuss for years and years and use when we're successful in defending free speech and defending small businesses and stopping the government from rolling over our rights by putting bills into budgets and not having them considered in a transparent way. That's going to affect, in a positive way, democracy for decades to come. So it is more than just skill games, but right now we're fighting for that small business owner that depends on these skill games so much.
What I know, because you're my attorney in this matter, you can't vote for anything related to skill games in the General Assembly, but it's been an uphill climb for skill games and small businesses on this issue for a couple years because the casinos and their lobby is so big and powerful and all that. But what is your take, or what's the temperature, or what do you feel like the temperature is now inside the walls of the General Assembly as it relates to the skill game issue and small businesses as a whole, and kind of the things we're touching on? What has anything changed in your view?
No, but I think the General Assembly is girding up for a fight. I think they know casinos, gambling, control of who oversees casinos and gambling. We talked about that before. JLARC study, Joint Legislative Review Commission, came out and said, let lottery oversee casinos. A lot of our legislators don't agree with that. We're going to have a fight on who is. Do we have a gaming commission? Do we let another government agency do the oversight for casino gambling and gaming? So we've got that fight. But what I'm really seeing from a lot of my friends in the General Assembly on both sides of the aisle is that they did not appreciate that in voting for a budget, in fact, they've had to vote for this budget rider which banned skill games and affected small businesses. So what I've seen, and a lot of people have reached out to me, and you're right, I can't vote on this because I represent you, and so you have a stake in the outcome. And so I would do what's called an R36. I would abstain based on so that I'm not voting for something in violation of any ethical principles. But most of these legislators that I've talked to, almost all of them, I haven't had one negative one, have said, man, I'm pissed that this happened this way. I don't like it. It's not good government. And even if they were ambivalent or weren't maybe even for skill games, they're like, we can't let this happen. We need to find a solution. We need to regulate and tax reasonably these skill games and allow small businesses to participate. And I remind you, Hermie, and we'll talk about this in a little bit in another second, we have an election year coming up for the Senate Senate and the House, all 140 members, in November of 2023, a year basically from this, from right now, right here.
We do?
Yes, we do, actually. And so I think it's going to be a lot of where politicians who are wanting to be reelected are going to be listening to small businesses, as they should every day that they serve, but especially so. And I think you'll see a tidal wave of support. And I expect that, even if it's delayed, not by my making, and we don't have an outcome in the court case, and it goes in the General Assembly session, the General Assembly might actually solve this problem once and for all. It can't get rid of these skill games. These games are protected by free speech and the Constitution. It needs to find the skill games its rightful place and reasonable place in the economy of Virginia and this new gaming industry in the Commonwealth.
Well, we'll keep fighting. That's all we can do.
Absolutely. And, you mentioned that it's election season next year.
You mentioned.
Oh, I mentioned. I mentioned. But then, I got up this morning in my jammies, opened up the door, looked outside. There was a paper on my stoop. It was.
What kind of jammies? You wear like long pant jammies, or you wear Speedos, boxers, briefs, T-shirts?
Long pant jammies.
Commando.
My Star Wars jammies. My Star Wars jammies, with Yodas and shit all over
all
them.
right.
And,
I can see that. I can see that.
And a T-shirt. And I go out there, my hair's got bed head.
You walk around like Darth Vader?
Usually for the first 30 minutes, yes.
Okay.
And so I picked up my issue of the Emporia Independent Messenger, and lo and behold, the title on the front page above the fold was, Emporia Sadler to run for State Senate 2023. What say you?
Oh, you can't believe in Independent Messenger in Emporia. You know better than that.
I get it every, I don't know how it made its way onto my porch.
Well, here's the deal.
But I read it. I
Here's
believe
the deal.
it.
I have been quietly behind the scenes putting a team together, talking to, first and foremost, my family and friends and people that I trust about the possibility of making a run at Senate for 2023 next year. But at the same time, I've tried to keep things under wraps as much as possible because, as I have told you, and I feel strongly that I did not want to take any attention and focus away from the midterms, which those elections are next Tuesday night. So for about the last 4 to 6 weeks, I've had an event scheduled, or putting an event together to have at Fosho in Emporia on Wednesday, November the 9th, the day after the midterms, where I would officially announce that I plan to run for Senate and have like a kickoff to my campaign right there in my hometown of Emporia. Emporia, as you say.
Emporia.
But this morning, Wednesday morning, as you know, for the last 12 years on Wednesday, I've been a guest on the Maverick Talk Show.
102.3, right?
102.3, the Maverick.
PTM.
I've been that's it. I've been a guest every Wednesday morning for 12 years, and I could not believe it had been that long, because I started doing that kind of after I stopped doing John Boy and Billy, which I can't believe it's been 12 years since I stopped doing John Boy and Billy. But as you probably already know, FCC laws are tricky in that someone who is running for public office, there is some type of regulation within FCC regulations that says if you're running for public office and you even do commercials or on the radio in any kind of way, the radio station is obligated to provide equal airtime or equal opportunity to any opponent you may have that you're running against. So to make things easier and simpler for me and for the folks at 102.3, I announced live on the air this morning that at least for the foreseeable future, that this morning's show would be my last appearance on the Maverick Talk Show 102.3. And then people started calling in and started asking questions about why. So I went ahead and as best I could, explained why on the radio that I had to step down from being a once-a-week guest on the Maverick Talk Show. So I did say that I was planning an announcement and a campaign kickoff next Wednesday night, November 9th at Faux Show, which, by the way, is open to the public.
At 7 p.m.
And 5 minutes after that, the one of the writers from the Independent Messenger called me and said, "Hey, I see you made this announcement. I need to go ahead and run with it." And I'm like, "Well, okay, run with it." So that's what he did.
It's the unofficial official announcement. And those are crazy ass rules. I mean, there are a lot of politicians. We do this podcast. I'm an elected official. I hope when you become a state senator, we continue this podcast. I think contractually we're obligated to one way or the other. But it seems to me that you don't go on there.
Well, we're not governed by the FCC like terrestrial radio stations are.
True, but every time I listen on Wednesdays, I miss this Wednesday's performance. But I listen every Wednesday on my
You're
iPhone.
walking around the house in your Star Wars pajamas.
With the Yodas and shit on them. And I was reading the Messenger, who came out with this instantaneously. But you don't go on there and talk about your race. You don't go on there and you guys get into some political discussions. But there's never a time where you're furthering your campaign that I've ever seen, and I would know you to keep it that way. It's very funny. It's a hilarious show. Hermie is very funny, funnier on that radio show than he is on this podcast. And I hardly ever miss it, and have enjoyed it. I just think it's sad because, I know a lot of the listeners, that radio station's actually in North Carolina, but broadcasts into Southside Virginia and is a big part of the Southside Virginia community. But it just doesn't seem right to me that's the way it's got to be.
And look, not only can I not be on the morning talk show, I can't, while I'm actively running for office, I can't even voice my own commercials for my businesses.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. I have to get somebody else to voice my commercials. Y'all quit pointing at each other over there.
Brad has to go to the little boy's room, and he doesn't know where it is here in this office complex at Vista Installation. So I had to. Brad and I are good at fingers.
Go down the front door, out the front door, down the steps, take a right. It's the third holly bush on the right.
All the other renters at this complex will just be so overjoyed to see Brad outside doing what nature does. But
they'd be like, I've seen him on TV.
But how does an ad for Faux Show? Let's see, the famous Ric Flair ad from Faux Show. How does that affect the political spectrum, or give you some advantage over top of, say, a primary opponent who's a current delegate? Okay, she doesn't have a restaurant to advertise, but how does that affect politics? I don't get that.
Yeah, I don't know. Ric Flair would be fine for me to play, and that would be an option for me to get Rick to revoice some current commercials, and I've just got to decide who I want to get to be the voice of my businesses on the radio while I'm actively seeking public office. So I've just got to figure that out.
I'll do it. Why can't I do it?
You can do it.
Well, hire me. I'm done. I'm in. Done and done.
I already know by my current relationship with you that I'm not sure that I can afford you. In fact, I know I can't.
I would be happy to volunteer to be the voice of Faux Show, because I'd love to read, come on down to Hermie Sadler's Faux Show restaurant. I mean, it's great food. I am a true believer.
Yeah, but I don't know
in
how
restaurant.
that. I truly don't know until I check. I don't know. Aren't you going to be running for office?
Oh yeah. Is that an announcement?
So that might kick you out too.
Oh, okay. See, I don't get these FCC rules, man. That's just kind of crazy. But
so I was not as surprised that it may be a conflict of interest for the station for me to come in on Wednesdays, even though I would not be talking about the campaign or as a topic unless somebody asked. But they did surprise me a little by telling me that my commercials that I do for Saddle Brothers Oil Company or Slip In Food Marts or Faux Show or Quiznos or whatever would have to be voiced by somebody else other than me.
So what was the support like from the callers? Was it pretty big?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah, it was great.
I'm hearing already in the through the grapevine of politics that you're having, of course, an announcement, an official announcement at Faux Show 7 p.m. next Wednesday, November 9th. That's the day after the election. And already I'm hearing you're going to have hundreds of people out there, which is it's a great way to kick off. I remember when I kicked off my campaign the day after the election, actually the same way, but in different. The guy that I was running to replace had won a congressional seat. So after his election on Tuesday, that Wednesday morning, I announced I had 17 people there. So I think you've got a low bar in terms of beating me on how many people come out for your announcement. So I've got
it's been great. You know, we're planning to have it indoors at Faux Show, but depending on the weather and depending on the RSVPs and I'm really humbled by the support of people I've heard back from. If it gets too big, we'll do it outside in the parking lot. We'll do whatever it takes to accommodate people.
Look at you,
so,
Mr. Big
whatever.
Time. This is great. And it's going to be very exciting, and it's going to be a good race on the issues and what's important to Southside Virginia, and especially in your area of Southside Virginia. Having a voice for Southside Virginia to be sturdy, firm, and loud, and to get things done in the Senate of Virginia, I'd be honored to serve alongside you. And I'm excited about the race, and excited for you, and excited for the citizens of Emporia. This is a split district. It's the 17th district is probably 51-49 Dem. Is that right, Brad? Pretty close. So it can go either way. It's a flip district that can go either way. I think you come to the table not only just as a small business person, but also you have always been in every part of every community within the senatorial district and outside of that. You're a great employer. I've talked to your employees, and even though, I haven't, not the ones that you put up to have me talk to, but those people that work for you, love working for you. There's a lot of people that are rooting for you. So I'm excited about the possibilities, and congratulations on your official announcement.
And I guess I can tell people it'll only increase the crowd, but you're going to be in Emporia next Wednesday night and actually introduce me at this event. You are, or you're not?
Well, I've got a trial in Prince William County, and I'm going to head straight to your area and be there. So yeah, have a backup, but I should be there unless.
So it's not that you're embarrassed to introduce me. It's a time thing.
It's a time.
You're giving me the looks.
It's a time court obligation thing. Yes. I mean, okay. I could skip the court case.
But once you arrive, you don't have any. Because I was going to somewhat make a joke. There's a core group of people within the Republican Party that have been outspoken in their support and plan to be there, support me, and proudly from the get-go. But I've had fun texting other people inside of politics about being at the announcement, and you should hear some of the one of those.
Really?
And it's funny.
Really?
It is really funny.
Well, I had someone. Tanisha Pascal.
And look, let me just say I understand, because there will likely be a primary or a convention with Delegate Emily Brewer, and there are some that want to remain neutral until the end of a primary, and some of these people are in primaries with other people, and I get it, but I've just told these people, hey, I just want to make sure you know what I'm doing, and if you choose to come, and one of them, I got a hunt club dinner, and I've got it's been really funny.
Well, I'm not afraid.
Some of those,
I'm not afraid to support you.
Some are afraid.
Well, and it's kind of riding the fence line. I've got a similar situation here in but the district that I hope to serve, the new 7th Senate district. Inside, we have a very contentious primary going on between two very capable delegates who are sitting delegates who've been drawn in together. In fact, they're still working on their last year serving the people of their own old districts, but they seem to be especially focused on this new district in the House of Delegates. And, the better course of valor for myself is like, look, guys, you fight it out, be clean. Some people have heard about this, Murray March and Ren Williams. Be good, focus on issues, don't attack each other, but I'm going to sit over here and I love you both. You guys are fine. Just, get it worked out, and we'll see who wins, and I'll support whoever wins. So that does happen sometimes. It's not really intentional. I mean, quietly they want you to win, Hermie, and a lot of them, I get that question all the time. Is he running? Is he running? Is he running? From delegates, senators, people in politics, and I play dumb. So, which is not hard for me. But, I think it's going to be an exciting primary. I think it's going to be. Let's keep it about the issues, but you have such overwhelming support already. I was just saying, Tanisha Pascal sends me a text with a picture of the invite that you sent her and a personal invite that you texted her with, and she said, "I feel so special." And she said, "Unless he sends this to everybody." I said, "No, he does this individually. He sat there individually." And texted her. So she's coming. You're going to get a lot of support across the area. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And because this is a swing district, the 7th Senate District, it will determine, 17th Senate District, it will determine the balance of power in the Senate. If it goes Republican and you're the nominee, or if Emily Brewer's the nominee and it goes Republican, that means probably a majority in the Senate for Republicans moving forward in the last 2 years of Glenn Youngkin's administration. So this is a very important race in the 17th Senate District. And we need a strong leader. And I firmly believe, knowing you, you're a man of character and principle, that you are that leader.
Well, the good news is, as you and I have talked about, it'll be up to the people. The people can decide if they prefer to have somebody with prior political experience, or do they want to send an outsider in there with a strong voice that's going to stand up for what some of the needs that we have in Southside Virginia. And whatever the people choose, I'll be okay with.
Yeah, and look, I don't think experience based on a number of years of sitting in the General Assembly determines the outcome on who's more qualified, quite frankly. You have exceptional business skills, people skills, and you're a fighter, and you have a good heart. And that's what people need. They don't need another politician. They need somebody with those kind of experiences, life experiences, carrying forward, because it's a different world in politics and in government now. And, you just can't go with the same old playbook and the same old players.
Hey, I look at it this way. If you believe in the things that we believe in and care about the country and what it's going to be like for your kids and grandkids, we just can't afford to get this wrong this time.
Yep.
So I think we've got to get it right. And if getting it right means people sending me, I would be humbled and honored. If getting it right means sending someone else, but if me being in the race makes whoever ends up going a better candidate or better fit to serve, then in a lot of ways I've still won. So look, I don't like to lose, and I'm not planning on losing, but to me, it's not really all about winning and losing too. It's about the process, and I'm most excited that, you and I talked about it a couple of weeks ago when Emily Brewer announced an endorsement from former governor, Bob McDonnell. I'm like, oh, that's fine, but the people will choose.
Right.
The people get to choose who they want to send, and that's the exciting part. Is the people need to use their voice and look around what's going on. If they're happy with the way things are going, then if they decide to stick with who's there, that's great. If they want to take a chance on doing better, then I'll be an option. So I'm excited about that.
And the risk still is out there in the 17th Senate District that Louise Lucas, long time sitting senator out of Portsmouth, because she's afraid of the competition with Lionel Spruill, who's been put into the same district with her, much in the same way Marie March and Ren Williams, might move out to the 17th. So that will make it even more critical a race to make sure that we have the best candidate. And it will be, if that's what happens, it will be a bare-knuckle brawl, and somebody with a lot of intestinal fortitude and a spine has to be our candidate to not only weather the storm, but to convince people that Louise Lucas needs to retire. Because right now, Louise Lucas is on Twitter dropping F-bombs like it's going out of style. You've seen that, right, Hermie? You sent me some of those.
Yeah, I sent you a picture of that. I even shared a post on Facebook from a resident here of Greensville County, and about what she put on there. And of course, that's her, way of communicating and in her view, connecting with her supporters. But I just look, one problem that we can all agree that we have, Bill, that's Emporia, that's in your part of the state, Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, every corner of every district in the Commonwealth of Virginia, is we need to, if you're a legislator, regardless of your views or regardless of what side you're on, you need to try to be a positive role model for kids and young adults that we're trying to get on the right track. And to me, in her case, as a sitting legislator, state senator, to use that kind of language on social media, I'm just not sure what kind of positive influence that is for kids and young adults that are struggling in some of these communities, especially in communities like she serves,
Right.
Down in Portsmouth and surrounding areas. I don't have all the right answers. Louise doesn't have all the right answers. Nobody ever is going to make everybody happy all day, every day with your stances and your positions. But if there's one thing we should be able to agree on, is that we all need to try to lift up the youth and the young adults in these neighborhoods and communities. And it's just not, in my opinion, using that kind of language or expressing myself that way on social media is a good look for people that I'm trying to get to follow me.
Yeah, I mean,
if that makes sense.
I've got it right here. I pulled down her Twitter feed, and L. Louise Lucas on Twitter, at Senator Louise, writes, "Attention, Virginia. We passed legislation so cursing is no longer against the law. You can let loose. Tell me what you think about GOP candidates trying to take away our effing rights." And then a follow-up. "Republicans need to get an effing sense of humor and know a joke when they see it." I mean, come on, man. I mean, and she's been doing this over and over and over again. I guess it's now her signature move to drop the F-bomb in public over and over and over again, and then, of course, accuse Republicans of dastardly things that they're responsible for. But, we passed legislation so cursing is no longer against the law. That's a lie. We've never had cursing.
Yeah, I don't
against the
understand
law.
it. I don't understand it.
But anyway, I mean, it's just kind of loony. But that's your potential competition if you get through the primary. When you get through the primary, and that makes it even more important to win the 17th back for Republican control, the new 17th Senate district.
To each his own. Like I say, there'll be a discussion on the issues and what's the right way to try to uplift our communities. That includes everybody. But I don't see how it's positive to continuously use that kind of language for people to read on social media that I want to follow me to a better place. I just don't get it, but she has every right to express herself.
Free speech.
As she sees fit.
Free speech, amazing that she wants to limit the free speech of skill games because she's been on the side of casinos, but then touts free speech on her Twitter feed to drop F-bombs. Now that Elon Musk is going to be owning Twitter, she may feel much more freer than even now she does at this time. But free speech is important. And remember, the First Amendment, freedom and protection of free speech protects not the speech that no one gets offended by. The First Amendment protects speech that most people are offended by, and we must remember that, and really stops the government from hindering one's expressions. And that's one of the most sacred rights that we have.
And that makes me mad as a... Oh, no.
I remember. So anyway, that's my leaning right moment. We just threw our conversation because I want to get to the most important things that we dealt with last week.
Did you mention your sponsor?
I did not, because I had one more thing to lean right on, and that is very short and very quick.
Okay.
Everybody, see if you can't get down to Faux Show next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Might be inside, but I'm having a feeling it's going to be in the giant parking lot of the Sadler Travel Plaza. But you need to be there. It's history-making time right there in Greensville County, right in the city of Emporia, at 7 p.m. Wednesday, November 9th at Faux Show. Go there for the official announcement of Hermie's courageous fight, stepping into the ring, just like he did in wrestling, but this stuff is real. This ain't choreographed, where he's going to take on a primary opponent, and also, hopefully after he wins the primary, he's going to take on a Democrat and win the 17th Senate District. So do not miss that. The second thing I'm going to tell you as I end here is that less than a week from now, this is Thursday when you start to listen to this, on November 8th, Tuesday, is the last day to vote. Now you can do early voting right now. So if you listen to this now, go vote early if that's what you want to do, or you have something going on Tuesday, you can't be there. You want to be voting this year. It is one of the most important elections of our lifetime. especially to stop the Biden madness, Biden inflation, Biden fuel shortages, everything that's going on and going wrong about this country. You can stop by returning a Republican majority to the House of Representatives and a Republican majority in the United States Senate this November. I think I see a red tidal wave. It looks pretty good. I think you've seen great support move from Hispanic communities, African-American communities towards Republicans, because people just, what matters to them, people are just fed up with the policies that have gotten us in this mess. So make sure you vote on Tuesday, November 8th. All day, polls in Virginia close at 7, open at 6 in the morning. Make sure you go out there and participate. It's your duty. It's your obligation. And if you don't vote, then you can't bitch about what happens to your state and your country afterwards. You have to be a part of this. I think it's our solemn oath to freedom and liberty to participate in the election process. So go out and vote. And that Leading Right moment was brought to you by Charlie's Waterfront Cafe in beautiful downtown Farmville, Virginia. Good food, good drink, good fun. Eat indoors, eat outdoors. Go to the wine cellar. Have dessert. Have a nice cocktail at the bar. You can do it all at Charlie's Waterfront Cafe, Farmville, Virginia. Man, that sounded
Congratulations.
good. Thank you. That was really good. I was like,
wonderful Leaning Right.
I'm getting ready for the Manscaped ad. That's what said. See, I'm just firing myself up so I can do it right.
All right, let's hear it.
Oh, you want to do it now? All right. Before we turn left and talk about Martinsville Speedway and the great events that went on there, let me see what I can do. All right, as the holidays are approaching, this holiday season, I'll be giving thanks to our friends over at Manscaped. Everyone loves turkey and stuffing, but you'll be looking like dessert with the help of Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming have blessed you with the ultimate Thanksgiving dinner topic. Tell your in-laws about your new cutting-edge ball trimmer and gift yourself or the man in your life the ultimate men's
I can see me now telling Billy and Barbara Ann Slate about my grooming habits at this supper table.
Trim your pumpkins by going to manscaped.com and use promo code Sadler at checkout. That's promo code Sadler, S-A-D-L-E-R, for free shipping.
Of course it is.
For free shipping and 20% off. Now, if you think your holiday spread is good, it's time to give thanks for the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0, or as I like to call it, the perfect package for your package. Inside, you're going to find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver deodorant for down there, Crop Reviver toner, Performance Boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold all your goodies. Think of it as a cornucopia for your doodads. The Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer features cutting-edge technology, reduces grooming accidents. It's got the advanced skin-safe technology. I swear by it. It's a great instrument to use, and plus it has a light. So you can turn on the light, and you can see what's going on while you're doing it. The Performance Package 4.0 includes a weed whacker to chop your worst weeds up in the top of your nose and in your ear. And the older you get, Hermie, you get more of those nose hairs and more of those ear hairs. My kids like to point them out on my ears when they show up, and I immediately zap them with the Weed Whacker by Manscaped.com. Don't forget the liquid formulations that they provide either. The Crop Preserver is doodad deodorant, and the Crop Reviver is toner spray that are like pumpkin pie and ice cream after a good Thanksgiving dinner. And if this wasn't enough, they also have shower products, which I use. And Hermie's like relaxed right now. He's pushed his chair back. He's just waiting me to finish, but he's enjoying it while I'm saying it.
You enjoy this too much.
Well, sure, because I'm all in, man. We're all in for our sponsors, and I'm all in for Manscaped.com. I use the products. I used the body wash this morning. Brad, come over here. Smell me. Do I smell good? Delicious. Yeah, it's delicious. That's kind of weird. All right, but I smell good. I used the...
That's a little much.
He was still a foot away. Yeah, I used the body wash. I used the shampoo this morning. It's great. Look at my hair. I'm having good hair day. I always have good hair day with the
Not a hair
product.
place.
I know. Look at that. Yeah. Even with this, with the earphones over there, I still look pretty dang good. And so, no hygiene routine is complete without these products. And certainly, you can add the deodorant, the Manscaped deodorant as well. A couple of swipes of that, and you'll be feeling so crisp, you'll be willing to scale the side of a mountain just because of your deodorant. Try it. I did once. So get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code Sadler at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the promo code Sadler. Be thankful this holiday season for the best gift of all from Manscaped, your balls will thank you. Thank you, Manscaped.com, for being a sponsor of the show. We really appreciate it. I am sure that at one time, Hermie will read this someday. But I swear by the product. My wife got it, and if you get the 4.0 performance package, you can
You just can't stop.
No,
you
but
just can't
you
stop.
can send it out as a gift. I mean, to your dad, to your brothers, to your friends, to your neighbors, to your spouse.
I will say
it's
a great Christmas idea. But what would you think? Now you got yours from the podcast Heat Team.
Correct.
What would you think if you knew nothing about this until your wife went and bought it for you and gave it to you for Christmas, and it wasn't a sponsor of the show? Would you think that's a little bit of a moment that
like she's trying to tell me something?
Yes.
Well, look, I mean, everybody has grooming products. Women have grooming products. Why don't men? Manscaped.com is willing to step out there.
You changed the subject, Mr. Lawyer, sir.
Well done.
I ask you a question.
Yeah. Would I think it a little weird that?
How would you feel if Manscaped was not involved with the show, which I'm glad they are? You can go to manscaped.com, get 20% off, code Sadler, get the Weed Whacker and Performance Package 4.0.
Yeah.
But my question is, getting back to the point, if we weren't doing this podcast, or if you had never heard of that product and your wife went out using the 20% off code name Sadler at manscaped.com and bought you the Performance Package 4.0, Weed Whacker, ball toner, all that, and gave it to you for Christmas, would you not think that she's trying to say, Billy Rose?
You need to do some handling. Well, okay, so it's not a set of golf clubs, but it's still, the older you get, the more practical your gift should be. And so, in fact, I've bought refills from the products I've already used, and I have bought. I'm going to tell you right now, and hopefully my son doesn't listen to this episode, but my older son's getting the Manscaped 4.0. He's getting the performance package. Shut up, Brad. Brad's getting one. He doesn't know it yet.
Okay, I've got 3 daughters, so I'm not interested in what your
one.
son's getting.
Okay. Well, thank you, Manscaped.com, for being a sponsor of this show, and every week that we've had the sponsorship, it's certainly made for some interesting
Can we take a break?
Sure.
Can we take a break?
Sure, we can take a break. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, we're going to be turning left in the exciting weekend at Martinsville Speedway. We've got a lot to talk about there, and then the third segment, it's going to have to be the third segment now, we're going to have the history of racing in Martinsville, a panel discussion that went on right before the races at New College Institute, one of these great higher ed centers that we have in Southside Virginia. So, welcome back. Let's welcome back. Screw that up. We'll be right back with our turning left moment.
Right after these words.
Thank God you saved me. We'll be right back.
Hi, folks. This is Hermie Sadler. Thanks for listening to our all-new podcast, Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I hope you are enjoying the show as much as Senator Stanley and I enjoy bringing it to you. Whether you're a family traveling together or a truck driver hauling freight up and down the highway, I hope you will take the time to visit one of our Sadler Travel Plaza locations in Virginia and North Carolina. Sadler Travel Plaza locations are licensed dealer locations for Pilot Travel Centers, and we also carry Shell Motiva petroleum products for our four-wheel friends. We pride ourselves on providing one-stop shopping for service, food, and entertainment. Our food options include Five Guys Burgers and Fries, Quiznos, Dairy Queen, Hermie Sadler's Faux Show Bar and Grill, Victory Lane Restaurant, Hunt Brothers Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts, and much, much more. Our locations include Sadler Travel Plaza in South Hill, located off I-85 at Exit 12. The Sadler Travel Plaza of Emporia, which is conveniently located on Exit 11B off I-95, and Sadler Travel Plaza on Highway 58 in Suffolk. We also have our North Carolina location, Sadler Travel Plaza in Dunn, North Carolina. That's Exit 75 off I-95. We appreciate all of our customers. And Bill and I appreciate you listening to Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic.
Hey, this is Bill Stanley, Hermie Sadler's sidekick on this podcast. When I'm not in Richmond at the Capitol or doing this podcast, my real job for the past 27 years is as a trial attorney with the Stanley Law Group. Here at the Stanley Law Group, we represent our clients in every courthouse in the Commonwealth. No problem is too small for us to solve. No case is too big for us to win. Whether it's criminal charges, traffic offenses, civil disputes, litigation matters of any sort, we handle it all. We make sure that we treat every client like family because they are to us. Your problem is our problem. Your success is our success because we hate to lose more than we love to win. And believe me, we win a lot. Don't believe me? Go ask Hermie. I'm his favorite lawyer, and he hates lawyers. So give us a call at 540-721-6028 and let us help you. Or visit our website at www.vastanleylawgroup.com. That's www.vastanleylawgroup.com. At the Stanley Law Group, we'll make sure we're the lawyers that you swear by and not at. And we're back. I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right.
I'm Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left, leaning right and turning left with Sadler and the Senator. As always, it's powered by Pace-O-Matic. That is an entertainment company that develops gaming software that players love to play and can use their skills to win every single time. Plus, these games of skill provide vital revenue to keep family-owned small businesses like bars, restaurants, convenience stores, and truck stops alive and thriving, especially here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
And I'm here at Vista Installations. It is a woman-driven, woman-owned business. My wife owns the business. We have a lot of great employees here for Vista. They're all female. I went in to use the restroom after Brad Tuesday used the restroom, and he had left the seat up. How about some of that? I mean, it's just trying to be in a. They're our host, Brad. You got to put the toilet seat down, brother. I mean, I'm gonna have to tell my wife you did that. So well done, buddy. But I put it back in its original form for you. So in this segment, we're going to turn left.
And probably the bathroom smelled like potpourri.
Poopery, yes. Yeah. He spent a lot of time in there. He kind of lingered. Anyway, though.
Hey, so we're gonna do a turning left moment.
Yeah.
That's sponsored by Vista Installations, a quality window and door installation company whose owner, Laura Stanley, has been babysitting politicians and attorneys for well over 12 years now.
Yes, she does. She's multifaceted, multi-talented, wonderful, wonderful human being. Very blessed to have her. So let's talk Martinsville racing. This was, of course, the race was on Sunday. This is now Thursday when we're dropping this podcast. But a week ago from the date of dropping this podcast, you and I were in Martinsville at the Speedway for a very special event. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was a fun weekend, man. I have a special place in my heart for Martinsville Speedway. You know, I used to go watch back in the late 70s, early 80s. My whole family used to go when you used to have the Dogwood 500 and Cardinal 500 double headers with late model sportsman classes back in the day that my Uncle Bud Elliott used to race in. So it was 250 laps for them, and then 250 laps for the open wheel modifieds, drivers like Jeff Bodine and Richie Evans and Maynard Troyer and Satch Worley and all these guys. And all these years later, to be a co-owner of SS Racing with you, Senator Stanley, and to take open wheel modified cars back and race at that famed speedway last Thursday night was a bunch of fun.
Yeah, it was a bunch of fun. We had Sadler Stanley Racing and SLG Stanley Law Group. We got a suite. We invited 65 people. About 63 of those 65 people showed up. Had a really good time. They were eating Martinsville hot dogs, watching the race, and we had two cars in that race driven by some real superstars of racing, didn't we?
Yeah, we had two of the best, Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman. I mean, to have those guys driving our cars for us like that at that track was, and what a field of cars too. They had 36, 37 cars, so they had a tremendous field. Ryan, of course, had driven a couple races for us. He ran Martinsville, not only Martinsville, but ran Richmond, and of course won the big returning race in North Wilkesboro for SS Racing. And then Bobby Labonte we wanted him to give him an opportunity in our second car. He runs on the Smart Tour, but we wanted to give him a chance at Martinsville in the Wheeling Tour in our car, and we took him over there in a brand new car and first time driving for our guys, and he was actually sixth fastest in practice. So the car had speed, but both our cars qualified kind of in the middle of the pack, and you run that risk of, in all that traffic, getting caught up in fender benders and things of that nature, and that happened to Bobby multiple times on the track.
Yeah, in fact, we got
Ryan got spun at one time too, and was able to.
Yeah, well, I just cut in. I'm sorry. We've got a clip of actually the second incident that Bobby was involved in. Actually, he got involved with our favorite guy, Jeremy Kirshner, who just seems to get tangled up with our equipment on the Smart Series. But let's play that clip real quick of Bobby Labonte's second incident.
Either he got something on the tires.
We've got a caution on the speedway. A two-car incident in turn one, and it's Bobby Labonte once again. That 17 machine pulling away from the scene there. Labonte had some damage early on.
There you go. That was pretty much Bobby's night. He spun twice, finished in the back of the pack. Had to actually retire from the race, didn't he, Herm?
Yeah, the second incident, he tore up the right front and the whole right side of the car, really. But that's okay. Our guys are getting it fixed up and getting it back, put it back together, and we'll get back to the track with Bobby real soon. But it was such a pleasure to have Hall of Famer Bobby Labonte in our car for the first time. And we learned a lot. The first time that PSR and Phil Stefanelli had been to Martinsville Speedway. That's a different animal than anywhere else that we go to. Not only the handling characteristics of the track, but we hadn't run a whole lot of Wheeling Modified Tour races. That's a different animal as far as tires that are available and adjustments and the way the races are run and things of that nature. So Bobby had hard luck and didn't get to finish, but luckily for us, we had two cars on the track, and Ryan Newman was able to pick up the slack and bring home a top five.
Yeah, in fact, let's play that finish. That's cue number 4. Ryan Newman at the finish line. Let's hear it again.
Final trip around Martinsville Speedway in the 75th anniversary of this venerable Virginia oval. Final round of the NASCAR Wheeling Modified Tour for 2022, and collecting his first ever victory on the tour here at Martinsville, the car number 53 of Corey LaJoie. Second spot goes to the 60 of Hirschman, third to Ryan Newman, fourth to Bobby Santos III, fifth to Anthony Nacella, who made a great recovery. And there is your winner.
How about that?
Yeah, top five with that field of cars was quite an accomplishment. Ryan did a great job. He got behind the 8-ball a couple times with some track position issues and got spun out one time, but he's a battler. He battled and fought all the way back for a third-place finish for SS Racing at Martinsville, and quite a day overall for our race team. You had about 75 people up in a suite there at the Speedway, some business associates, some friends of yours, in the political arena, and other supporters of our race team, and just some friends there as well as family members. So they seemed to enjoy the race. When Ryan, on that last restart, got up to second there on one time on the restart, the whole suite kind of popped, with applause. So they were watching and paying attention to the SS Racing cars. And so congratulations to Ryan and PSR and the team for getting the top five in a very tough field of modifieds at Martinsville.
And the winner of that race is a familiar name, a NASCAR name, current driver, Corey LaJoie, who has a history in modifieds, does he not? Yeah,
he's running in the series some. His dad was Randy LaJoie, who I raced against many, many years in the Busch Grand National Series, and he drove a car owned by Bono Mannion that has been involved in the Cup Series over the years as a crew chief, but has owned and raced modifieds for years and years and years. And they were fast. The 53 was fast. I mean, he passed Hirschman under green flag conditions and walked away from him. And so, anytime you can do that, that's a testament to how balanced and how fast your car is. So our guys did a good job to be able to compete with those guys and bring home a top five finish. And I'm looking forward to getting both those guys back in the cars at some point and letting them race again for SS Racing. It's neat to for Ryan and Bobby, not only to be the accomplished racers that they are, but friends of mine as well, kind of coming back full circle again to get to work with them in this way, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and those cars actually had a new paint scheme, had the lunar yellow, the Sadler colors, lunar yellow, orange, and black, and I thought that was pretty special.
You got to admit, you can see them on the track at night.
And they stand out from the other cars. I mean, there was no problem finding them in the pack. And they
I remember all those years I'd ask my dad, I'd be like, is there any way I can change the color of the car, And not as long as you want me to sponsor it, you can't.
Well,
but I learned over time to appreciate it, because it does pop off the track with that rocket red number and stuff on it. It's a good looking ride.
It's a good looking
ride. My guys
ride.
had them looking good.
Yeah, I had when I was 16, I drove a 1978 Monte Carlo in that exact color, lunar yellow. And so
I bet that was a chick magnet.
Yeah. My friends called it the P machine. So if that helps. But it was it's a beautiful car, two beautiful cars, and two great race car drivers. So it was a
some
fun
of my
night
buddies. You've had a chance to meet some of my friends.
Yeah.
From Southside Virginia.
Taught me a lot about you.
You said that it's helped you understand more about who I am and why I act the way I do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Some friends of mine back in high school, the Harrisons, Ben Harrison, Peebles Harrison,
I went to school with them.
They had an old Ford Fiesta in a yellow color like that, and we affectionately refer to that car as the Chicken.
That's a better nickname than mine was. My chick magnet. There you go. Mine was the P machine, and
we would load up in the Chicken, maybe or maybe not, with some little pony-sized Budweisers, and ride around in the Chicken. Does it surprise you at all for me to tell you that Ben Harrison drank a cold beer in his day?
That's shocking. I would never have thought that in all the 4 years of college at Hamden, Sydney. I never would have thought that. Jeez.
What was it that turned him red like that all the time if it wasn't
that? Anger? Frustration? Embarrassment? I don't know. The Harrison family is a great family. And so we were happy to do really well in the wheeling race. But then talk to me, NASCAR, former NASCAR Fox analyst, Hermie, about the weekend. Former. Yeah. The weekend at NASCAR was, in my mind, spectacular.
Why don't you ask me specific questions and I'll give you answers on those topics?
Oh, I would love to do that. Okay. So let's start with the Xfiniti race that was on Saturday. I thought, again, these are the old cars. That was some of the best racing I've ever seen at Martinsville, with the stakes that were on the track trying to get into the Final Four. What a great race all the way around. People were passing each other. They're getting a little chippy. Talk to us a little bit about what you saw at the Xfiniti
Ask
race.
me a specific question, and I'll give you a specific answer. Not tell me what you thought. Ask me a specific question, and I'll give you a specific answer. I'm going to teach you how to interview somebody.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. I can learn from Hermie. All right, so what did you think of the ending?
So they always told me in my years, if you're going to interview somebody, ask a question. For me to say, tell me what you thought, that's not asking a question.
Well, hell, let's just jump to the end then. As they're battling out at the 4, you've got Brandon Jones, a member of Joe Gibbs Racing, driving the 20, I think it was. And he's got behind him Ty Gibbs, grandson of Joe Gibbs, son of Coy Gibbs. Basically in there, they had a couple restarts. They got a green-white checker. They go into turn 1, 3 wide, and all hell starts to break loose. So
what's the question? You see what I'm getting to here? This is what I went
as
through
a former race car driver, what did you think of that last lap? And actually, here, I tell you what, we're going to play the last lap if you don't mind.
Okay.
Maybe that'll help.
He's sideways, but he lurches out front. The white flag, one more time around. Jones gets tagged by the 54. Whoa! Ty Gibbs out front, Jones around, caution comes out.
That sounded odd.
Ty Gibbs sees the checkered yellow flags. And Ty Gibbs put the bumper to the back of the 19, and that's the damage that happened after.
Not a good teammate.
Yes,
right
they
there.
drive for the same organization, Joe Gibbs Racing. And the way they finished, it will be Allgaier that would advance to the championship 4.
It's one thing to get moved out of your way by your teammate. It's a whole other thing to get wrecked by him.
I was thinking the same thing, and I often feel on restarts it's kind of open game, but coming with 1 lap to go to get absolutely turned around, it's going to be hard to swallow for the driver of the 19. Let's take a look, guys.
So my question is, you see, bumping in racing, in short track racing, that's bumping people out of the way, making them go high. That's not uncommon. But what we saw there in the last lap was Ty Gibbs, who had already made the Final 4, is behind his teammate at Joe Gibbs Racing, Brandon Jones, and not only dumps him, wrecks the car. I mean, hit him so hard the roof, the hood on the car buckled up, and then passed him for the win. I mean, is that good racing, or is that bad form? So yeah,
that was a total. You finally got around to it.
I asked a question. Answer it.
That was, in my view, a total dick move by Ty Gibbs on a number of fronts. Number one, to your point, Ty Gibbs was already in the final championship round. Brandon Jones, had he won, would have put 2 Gibbs cars in the championship 4 instead of 1. But it was no chance he was going to make that pass. No way he could make the corner. He didn't even give him a chance. Moving somebody out of the way is not what Ty Gibbs did in that case. He absolutely ran over him on the last lap to win the race. And what made it even more difficult for me to swallow or comprehend was how Ty Gibbs, after the race, tried to, he goes up and wants people to, hey, bring it on, bring the booze on, and kind of wants to be the bad guy. And then he gets on the radio after the race and starts talking about God. So
yeah, actually
I just didn't.
Yeah. But what he said was, well, people hated Jesus too, so he compared himself to Jesus Christ, which is just a little out there. I mean, that's just, to me, that just shows a lack of self-awareness.
So if you decide, if you're selfish enough, look, I know he wants to win, but so did Brandon Jones. Brandon Jones had position. He should have at least tried to pass him in turns 1 and 2, and see what happens in 3 and 4. But just given the circumstances, and I just don't think he tried to pass him at all. And his granddad owns the team, and his dad works with the team now, and so the Gibbs team has to pretend like they're upset with him about it. But just a bad move and a bad look and a bad reaction afterwards. To me, a bad day for Ty Gibbs. Some will disagree. They'll say, Earnhardt wrecked Terry Labonte at Bristol in 1994, all that. But just a bad move. I'm not a fan. I'll leave it at that.
Well, and there weren't a lot of fans that were happy about it either. In fact, we've got the clip here that actually demonstrates this huge burnout. I mean, he did an extraordinary burnout, I think, over-the-top burnout in front of the grandstands, and there was a nice crowd there for the Xfiniti race, and they let him have it. Let's listen to the finish of the race, his burnout, and the reaction of the fans.
Tires are coming completely apart on the 54 here. The crowd will show if they liked what they saw or didn't like it as soon as he climbs out of that car. Here's the championship 4. Allgaier gets in on points. You hear a little bit of applause for the 54 of Ty Gibbs, but it's Allgaier, Josh Berry, Noah Gragson, and Ty Gibbs. Those are the championship 4 that will fight next week for the title.
He's out of the car.
Xfiniti Series, and now you hear the crowd responding. Marty.
The boos raining down from the fans at Martinsville. Ty Gibbs with a win, but a very controversial way to go about it. He actually waves on the boos.
I mean, that little pipsqueak has got some confidence. Now, it's always good to have a villain in NASCAR, in racing, but he seems to be going about it over the course of the year where he does something stupid, gets in fights, then says, I've learned my lesson, and then he does something stupid like this. I mean, what have they got on their hands? This guy's going to go into the 18 next year, I guess, because Kyle's leaving. He's going to move up to Cup. I guess the same reaction for the 18 that they've had with Kyle Busch in the car is going to continue with Ty Gibbs. Is he setting himself up to be the villain because that makes him in the same way of like Dale Earnhardt Sr. or Kyle Busch or any other driver?
Yeah, I think he probably thinks that he's positioning himself to be the next Kyle Busch, I guess you might say. But everybody's entitled to an opinion. I'm just not a fan of, and this is not the first time he's raced, maybe not to that extreme, but raced that way. And you take Brandon Jones, who had track position and was racing for a chance to get another team car into the Final Four, and Ty Gibbs, in my opinion, decided, and look, and things happen inside the car really fast. I'm not sure how much he premeditated or knew where people would be. Brandon Jones made a great move to get in position to have a chance to win the race, but in my view, going in turn one, Ty Gibbs winning business for himself.
Yeah, and in fact, the crowd did not stop with the boos, recognizing that Ty Gibbs probably has his ride because of his last name, started chanting as only the great citizens of Martinsville and those that come to the races can. Let's hear some of that.
Thank you, Grandpa! Thank you, Grandpa!
Sounded like Let's Go Brandon got a revision. Thank you, Grandpa.
In full disclosure, I didn't hear any of that, so I didn't hear it on my end.
Yeah, well,
so as long as the show heard it.
It was Thank You, Grandpa in the sound of Let's Go Brandon.
Yeah. So, but let me say this. I will say that Ty Gibbs probably got his opportunity because of his grandfather and his father, but he doesn't have his ride because of them, and he's not moving up because of them. He is one hell of a talented race car driver.
Yeah, I agree.
There's no question about it. He can win on short tracks, intermediate tracks. He's really picked up on road courses. And that kind of goes back to my point. He doesn't have to race that way to be successful. And he just went over his head and made that happen. But I want to make sure I'm clear in saying that, he got an opportunity probably because of his last name, but he has proven to be a race-winning caliber driver. And I hope he realizes that sooner rather than later. He does not need to race that way with no regard for other people, their equipment, their safety, and otherwise. He doesn't need to do that to be successful. He's very talented.
Yeah, and if you rewind the season just a little bit more before that, he gets in an incident in the pits when he's coming out. He gets bumped a little bit. He shoves the other car back. Could have hurt many, many people. He's gotten into fights with people where he's kept on his helmet and dropped a 1-2 on the face of a fellow driver. Now he's ticked off his former team, or about to be former teammate, who's moving over to JR Motorsports, Junior Motorsports, Brandon Jones. You're going into the last Phoenix race. What do you see setting up here? What he did allowed 3 of Junior Motorsports drivers of the 4 that they run to get into the Final Four. He's got Brandon Jones who's going to be ticked off at him and is actually going to JR Motorsports. I don't think Ty Gibbs is going to have a really good day at Phoenix, and he'll make it for some interesting racing.
What's the question?
Golly Moses. How do you see it? How do you see the final race in Xfiniti forming up on next Saturday's race?
It will be interesting to see how Brandon Jones races Ty Gibbs, being that they're teammates for one more race, or you could call them teammates. Seems like that ended this past weekend at Martinsville. Oh, yeah. But going up against a couple of Junior Motorsports cars, it will be compelling television, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So let's move to the Cup race, which for me, and maybe for you, of course, I sat on the couch and watched it with my son Chandler. We watched the Xfiniti race Saturday night. We taped it, and we went out go-karting so he and his cousin could go out ride go-karts in Roanoke. Had a really good time, had a kid day. Came back, watched the race. We were screaming at the TV for what Ty Gibbs did to Brandon Jones. But then we got to the race at Cup. And on Sunday's race at Cup for me for the first 100 some odd laps were, not a lot of passing. The only person I saw that was passing was was Denny Hamlin. I mean, he started out 11th or 12th and got to the front in the first stages. Brad Tuesday was actually at the race. Brad, did you enjoy the race?
We left around lap 4:30 to beat the traffic.
Are you kidding me? He left during 4:30 when the racing got good. Hermie, what did you think of the race?
Big time party foul.
That's our Brad. So, to beat the traffic. Hermie, what did you think of the race? I mean, especially the last 20 laps.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a much better Martinsville race than you had in the spring. I thought the track was taking rubber. I thought the racetrack was rewarding good, balanced race cars. You mentioned Denny Hamlin, passing his way to the front a couple occasions. Ultimately, Denny has had a history of having pit road penalties at crucial times that have hurt him. But on Sunday, it wasn't that. It was his pit crew that let him down a couple times. He lost 5-6 positions over the last couple pit stops that really took him out of contention for the win. Denny really, on the long run, had the fastest car, but he wasn't fast enough to pass cars in the relatively short runs they had in the latter stages of the races. And that opened the door, that and pit stops opened the door for the Christopher Bells, who would come down pit road later and got tires and got the benefit of a couple extra cautions to reset the field and all that. And then, a couple other cars stayed out, like the Chase Briscoes and those kind of people that, took a chance by staying on the racetrack on old tires. Had the race, stayed green before the last couple cautions, Chase Briscoe might have won. So I really like a race that rewards good long run speed, but encourages people to come get tires and have differing pit strategies. We had all of that in the last 75 laps, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was great to watch, and it had a historic finish. I mean, you've got one of the most exciting things was not just Christopher Bell working his way to the front, and that would be the story. I mean, this guy won an elimination to get into the final 8, was probably at the bottom of the list in that 8 going into this race, had to win to get into the final 4, pulls it off again, pulls it off for Joe Gibbs Racing. I thought he ran a wonderful race. He's a really good driver if you just look at him. But one of the greatest things was looking at the TV screen with my son, where you could see just the points changing back and forth. This new playoff format, I think, is pretty exciting. But you saw this battle of points to where Denny, I'm about to say Hermie. Denny was up, then he'd be down 2 points, then they'd be even. And we went into the last lap, and I love and enjoy listening to MRN radio as well. We have the last lap call of this historic race on what happened to be an historic move for one Ross Chastain to move from not getting into the Final Four to knocking Denny Hamlin out of the Final Four.
He had to win, and he's going to win. Here comes Christopher Bell. He'll score the win. Further back, Ross Chastain.
Chastain did a video game move, drove it and never lifted. Put it against the safer barrier in turn 3, never lifted all the way around the turn, and Ross Chastain passes Denny Hamlin. Ross Chastain will get into the playoff.
Ross Chastain gets into the playoff with this.
Ross Chastain will get into the playoff.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen anything like it before. What were your thoughts about the last lap at Martinsville? See, I asked a question.
Yeah, there you go.
It's kind of lame, but I asked it.
It looked like iRacing all over to me. I mean, I've got an iRacing rig. You've seen it at my house before. Yeah. But in the early stages of iRacing, when those things came out, before iRacing kind of fixed the damage model of the cars and the tracks, you could actually go up and ride the wall at Bristol, hit the wall at Bristol and speed up. It would actually speed you up around the corner. And ultimately they fixed that. But Ross apparently had done enough iRacing, and Ross is a pretty accomplished iRacer. I've raced with him some on there, and we've been in some of the same sessions together, practicing and testing and things of that nature. And he was in a desperate situation and made a desperate move that I don't know how he figured that could work, because there's no way to test that without tearing a car all to pieces. But he was desperate men do desperate things, and he pulled it off. And I can honestly tell you that I've never seen anything like that. At the end of a 500-lap race on a long run, tore his car all to pieces up against the wall, and ran a track record lap speed around Martinsville Speedway.
Yeah, I mean,
around the wall.
Yeah.
Took his hands off the steering wheel, kept the foot in the gas, and kind of like a slot car, rode around the top of the racetrack and came and passed 5 cars in one corner.
Have you ever seen anything like it before in your life, all that racing you've done?
Not even close.
And,
not even close.
And so, you were saying it is a record-setting lap. It's the fastest lap ever in Martinsville. And one thing I think about Martinsville is speeds have been going down. But I then looked up this statistic just because it's so interesting. And I've seen the Chastain last lap move about 100 times. I can't get enough of it. But here's what I got. Chastain's last lap on his lap 499 was 20.758 seconds. His lap time on lap 500, where he made the move on the wall, was 18.845 seconds. That's the fastest lap ever by a stock car at Martinsville Speedway. He not only made it into the Championship 4, he's basically giving us every reason when you took math in school and said, what am I ever going to use that for? Because when you break down the math of that, Chastain did the first half of the lap normally. That would have taken him about half the time of lap 499, 10.379 seconds. That means he completed the last half of the lap 500 in 8.466 seconds, running an average of 112 miles an hour from the midpoint of the backstretch to the start-finish line. I mean, I don't know that anybody's ever run
if he'd done it
like that.
I don't know if he did it 1 and 2, he may not have had a car left in 3 and 4. But theoretically speaking, he'd have been under a 17-second lap if he'd have done it on both ends.
That's amazing. And so he makes history. What do you think what do you think NASCAR is going to do? You think that's now going to be the norm, or do you think they're going to step in and say you can't do it anymore and it'll be a once-in-a-lifetime thing?
I hope NASCAR doesn't step in because that's a self-policing thing. I think the only thing that threw me off for a quick second, because I was not expecting what Ross did. I was watching the race and I saw a car up in the wall on the white flag lap, and my first instinct was somebody blew a tire or somebody's throttle hung, which is very dangerous. I was waiting for the caution to come out, and I was thinking, oh no, people are going to raise hell that they threw the caution prior to people getting once you take the white flag, the race is over. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't have gone back to a green-white checker, but then it goes back to where people were when the caution came out, not necessarily where they were when they passed the start-finish line. But they didn't throw the caution, and then it just took me, like everybody else, it took me 2 or 3 seconds to really figure out exactly what the hell had happened. And but yeah. I hope NASCAR doesn't step in. If people want to try that this weekend, it has to be on the last lap, the last corner, because if not, you tear your car to pieces, you're done for the day.
Right.
So, but it does leaves the door open for potential fireworks on the last lap at places like that. The other things that's different, not only is the car, this is a tougher car body-wise. Now, he could have broken a toe link or something, probably easier. But also the safer barrier it's a slicker wall to the safer barrier as opposed to concrete. And the one thing that I would have thought about, maybe he did, maybe he looked at it, is a lot of these crossover gates have latches and things on them. Mm-hmm. But apparently he knew all of that was on the outside of the gate, not on the inside of the fence. So it gave him a good, slick, smooth surface all the way around the corner to ride the wall and keep the hammer down all the way to the start-finish line.
You know, and I was looking at the car later. Comparatively speaking, I mean, I would have expected that
very minimal damage.
Yeah, it would have been torn up more. And I guess my summation, I mean, what I kind of surmised was those single bolt wheels the single bolt in the middle of the wheel sticks out farther than the fender. And so maybe I guess he was riding on that. Is that possible?
No, he got the fenders on top of the tires. They stick out further than the side panel and the door and things of that nature. But I think the body configuration and the contour and context of the safer barriers certainly open the door for a move like that. But it takes a massive set on the last lap of a race like that to we used to say back in that day when you're getting ready to qualify, my guys would tell me, all right, throw them up on the dash, run wide open, you know. And Ross took that even a step further. That's not throwing them in the dash. I mean, that's throwing them up in the grandstands, you know, to let it hang. But he could go or go home, and he tried to go, and in this case, it worked out for him. It was unbelievable. Took unbelievable fortitude for him to do it, and unbelievable execution, and he made it happen. It was quite a spectacle.
Testicular fortitude indeed, and they booed him during introductions, but when he got out of the car inside the pit wall, they were cheering as if he had won the race, and so he may have changed.
He doubled his fan base.
Yeah,
no question. He doubled his fan base.
He's a very gifted, very talented driver. Runs the Liberty University car, which of course is a university here in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
No, that's
right.
William Byron.
William Byron. Sorry. He runs the Moose car. Sorry.
Number 1.
That's
for
right.
Trackhouse.
So
I know you want to be all knowing, omniscient. That's a big word.
Omniscient. Yeah. All right. Spell it.
OMNISCIENT.
I think that's right. Brad, check that. He might have actually spelled that right.
Yeah, please, let's not Hermie be right about anything.
No,
on
never,
the show.
never, ever, because you're right about everything else outside the show.
Yeah.
So what do you? I mean, for me, and we'll just close on this question. You know, if you're like you're saying, if you're Denny Hamlin, you've had bad pit stops, you fought back, heck, you led a couple stages, you know, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, your nemesis that you promised every week that he's going to get his for what he did to you earlier in the season, and he never went and got him his, passes you, or at least noses you out right there at the start-finish line and kicks you out of the playoffs. I mean, what do you think Denny's thinking right now?
Yeah, he's got to be in shock, because I know he had to think going into turn 3 with where Ross was and where he was, that he was solidly and safely going to advance. Nobody could have seen that coming. Nobody could have known. And now it's kind of funny after the fact to hear all the other drivers saying, "Yeah, I had thought about that. I wasn't sure." Like, bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, and then Kyle Larson said, "Oh, that's an embarrassment to NASCAR, and he shouldn't be doing that." But didn't Kyle Larson try something like that?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay, well, he kind of admitted that maybe he had tried something like that. It didn't work.
He may have tried to dive bomb somebody and then bounce off the wall, but I've never seen anybody purposely drive into the wall in turn 3 and keep the foot on the gas like a slot car almost.
Yeah.
And let the wall drive the car. Ross said he took his hands off the steering wheel.
Now, why would he do that? I mean, you're a driver.
He's following the wall to keep it. If you keep his hands on it and he hits something in the wall and it moves the wheel real quick, you could break your wrist.
Oh, okay. All right.
So he's just letting it ride the wall like a slot car.
Wow.
It was awesome.
It was awesome. Something that I've never seen in racing, and something we may never see again, or the party poopers at NASCAR may prevent from ever happening again. So that's all the questions. All my questions there on your turn and left moment. But I thought it was great. A weekend at Martinsville, and that's why the third segment that we've got coming up is the History of Racing in Martinsville NCI panel at New College Institute. We've got Satch Worley, the great Satch Worley, modified champion from the 80s and 90s, and even raced up into the 2000 season. And we've got, he's going to be talking to the crowd. That we had a big crowd out there. Warwick Scott, who's the grandson of Wendell Scott, the Jackie Robinson of NASCAR, who broke the color barrier. He runs the Wendell Scott Foundation. I hope we get that family on very soon. Rhett Vandiver, son of Jim Vandiver, who was a Winston Cup Series driver, an independent driver, raced from 68 to 83. He's got some great stories, some very funny stories as well. You've also got Clay Campbell, the president of the Martinsville Speedway racetrack, son of Clay Earls, who founded Martinsville Speedway, built
Son-in-law.
Son-in-law. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm right again.
Twice in one show. We better stop. And then, of course, we've got Chris Williams is on the panel, the racing director of the Smart Series and the king of merch for Dale Earnhardt Sr. Go back into our library. That's a very good episode interviewing the king of merch, who absolutely revolutionized the delivery of merchandise for Dale Earnhardt Sr. when he was living and racing and running. A great panel discussion. Takes about an hour, 20 minutes, but it's worth every minute. So we're going to go to that after the break, but what a great weekend at Martinsville. All hail Martinsville a great place to be. Love representing it as their state senator, and they delivered again. They delivered a great racing product all weekend.
Yeah, great weekend at Martinsville, and by the time we get back on, NASCAR will have decided all three of their touring division, upper three division champions: Truck Series, Xfiniti Series, and the Cup Series. So it should be an exciting weekend of racing. You and I are going to be in Richmond on Saturday.
That's right. That's right.
Commonwealth Club.
That's right.
Got a dinner that you're emceeing.
If you remember one of our previous podcasts, Jungle Girl, how'd you say it, Herm?
Jungle Girl.
She is holding a fundraiser for, the Women of Wrestling Fighting Cancer. It's a 2-day event in Richmond.
I wonder if she might entice you to hop into the squared circle. We'll see.
She probably could. But as MC, I will have a little bit more control over the crowd and how things happen. So hopefully I can maintain that control. But we're looking forward to it. Laura and myself are going up there. You and Angie are going to be there to support a great cause. If anybody wants to go, you can go to the Women of Wrestling or the Endorphasm organization and get some tickets and make a donation. It's going to be a great event. So I'm looking forward to that with you as well, Herm. And certainly, as we leave this segment of Turning Left, who's your choice to win Cup, to win that championship?
Wow. My heart wants to tell me Ross Chastain, just because sometimes I think fate just happens, and for him to get to that point. But I'm probably going to go with Chase Elliott. That'd be the safe bet.
Okay. I'm going to say Christopher Bell. He's peaking at the right time. He's on a roll, and he's driving really well. But we'll see who's right.
He's doing well. Sometimes when it gets to that level, you have to lose one before you win one.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Look, if Christopher Bell has been executing with his back against the wall, if he can do it one more time, he could very well be the champion.
And my son Chandler, he's got all his money pushed into the middle of the table for Joey Logano, the number 22 car. He'd only pick someone other than Joey Logano if Bobby Labonte was in the Final Four in the Championship Series for NASCAR Cup this year. So what you're
telling me is after Joey Logano retires from Cup, he'll be the next modified driver for us.
I was going to bring it up later, but yeah, that sounds like a great idea, don't you?
Now I know where all the decisions come from. Chandler.
It does.
Dad,
actually,
we have to get Logano, Dad.
Yeah.
Dad, we have to have Labonte, Dad.
Yeah. Probably true.
Yeah,
it is, because, he enjoys this. He loves the SSR racing team. But as I've said before, he goes out and roots for Bobby Labonte. He's on a different team. So I've got to create some harmony, some unity, some peace in my house, because right now I've got my 11-year-old boy rooting against our team SSR.
Well, congratulations, because you're creating peace in your house and disruption in my house. So congratulations.
Thanks. You want to call me the name you called me last night on the phone, or are you going to leave that one alone?
If Chad can get the bleep button ready, I will.
Go ahead.
No. I don't trust Chad that way.
Good boy, Chad. Good boy. All right, we're going to take a break. Yeah, there you go. He acted out the name he called me last night. And he just enjoyed the heck out of it, because it just stuck me like a knife right in the chest. So anyway, we'll be right back with the...
You said it. Nobody gets under your skin like I do. Your buddy
does.
Hermie.
Yep. Only you. And my wife notes that. She's like, nobody gets under your skin except Hermie Sadler. I'm like, yeah, and I don't know how he got there. I don't know what the secret unlocking was, but he gets me in a position where he just... Oh, man.
I thought we were friends.
We are friends. I love you to death. Love you to death. And look... It's not like I get all brisked up. Look, I think it's kind of fun.
No, you do get kind of brisked up.
Well,
yes, you do get kind of brisked up.
But okay. So, anyway, I still love you, and it doesn't change.
Hey, Chad, you get your mileage paid back for your trip to Martinsville last week?
No, I took 2 trips to Martinsville.
Oh, my God. Yeah, but one was
2
on
trips
your own.
to Martinsville.
No, I had to go drop the hero card.
Oh, the hero cards. Oh, God almighty. See, here you go again, Hermie.
See?
Here Hermie goes again. He's getting under my skin.
I think it's 58.5 cents per mile, Chadwick.
All right. So we're going to be right back. We're going to be right back with our final segment, the history of racing in Martinsville, Virginia at New College Institute. Make sure you give a listen. It's a great event.
Listen, man, I know it sounds too good to be true, but I want you to just do me a favor and run on over to savewithconrad.com. Get yourself a quick quote. My man Andy M. just left us a 5-star review over at conradreviews.com, and he had this to say. The effort and communication from Josh was above and beyond. We ran into several unexpected hiccups along the way, but Josh kept us informed and kept looking for options to get things done. In the end, we were still able to refinance to a 15-year loan, where we're going to be able to pay it off in 10, and we took enough cash out to pay off our credit cards, my truck loan, and even buy my wife her very first new vehicle. We're going to save over $500 a month from what we would have been paying without the refinance. We can't thank everyone enough. Now, guys, that right there is a win-win-win situation. Let me explain. Over the last couple of years, your house is probably worth more than ever. Now, what you do with that equity is up to you. And what I'm going to recommend is we do what our man Andy did. Andy took himself from a 30-year loan down to 15 years, but he's planning to pay it off in 10. Now, how can he afford to do that? We got rid of all his credit card debt, just like that. We got rid of his truck loan, and we even got him enough cash to get his wife a new vehicle. The result? Cheaper monthly payments. How does that happen? How do you get a new car, pay off a truck, and get rid of your credit cards and cut years off your loan? You go to savewithconrad.com. We're going to get you cheaper monthly payments. And how's this for starters? No house payments for the next 2 months. That's right. You can skip your next 2 payments. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket. And buddy, if we can't help you save some cash, we won't waste your time. And here's the best part. We don't say no. We say not yet, but here's how. Now, I don't care if you were late here or there. Maybe you had a bankruptcy back in the day. Maybe you were late on a credit card. We're going to help you figure out how to get in the situation that your family needs now and long term. We want to be your mortgage advisor for life at savewithconrad.com.
Well, guys, thanks for coming out. Let's have some fun tonight, all right? So I'm just going to start. I'm going to give you a layup to start with here. We'll just start with Chris and we'll work down. What made you fall in love with motorsports, and then why'd you pursue it as a career?
No, I, grew up on a racetrack road, and I got to kind of witness a lot of things that happened. I got to sit out in the front yard and watch all these haulers go down. And, I got to be a part of, just the excitement of race week. People don't realize when everybody comes into town and visit it, not only does it help the economic side of the city, but there's a lot of characters and people in the sport. And I got to meet some of those characters as I was growing up, and, seeing the difference back in the day between modifieds and sportsmen and Grand National, it intrigued my interest, and then along the way, my dad went to work for the racetrack, and me and Clay got to play around in the street a lot back in the day. And so I got to go do things at the racetrack that a lot of people couldn't do. And I fell in love with it. Not only just, the back support of it, it didn't matter if it was souvenirs or concessions or cleaning up on the track or whatever. I mean, Clay let me drive the pace car. I've flagged. I've done pretty much everything at the racetrack you can do. And then I met this guy named Dale Earnhardt, and it kind of changed everything. And so I realized that was the path I wanted to do. And it was the best choice for me and my family. And I'm not going to look back. So it's been fun.
All right. Hey, Satch, before you get into it, you mind just doing a quick introduction with your name and kind of the history in the sport?
Well, I'm Satch Worley. Kind of got a frog too.
That's all right.
Live in Rocky Mount. Been around racing here for about 100 years, I guess. But we're still here, but we're not doing much racing now. So that's about the long and short of it.
All right. Yeah, we'll pass on down.
Sure. Remember what's the question?
No problem. What made you fall in love with motorsports, and then why'd you pursue it as a career?
Well, my path was probably easier than some of the other guys on the panel here that eventually realized what they wanted to do. My grandfather, Clay Earl, started Martinsville Speedway. So, and as most of you in here probably know, this is our 75th anniversary. So been around a long time. And I knew right away that when I was old enough to understand what was going on, that was the life I wanted to be a part of. Now, did I want to be in the office sitting at a desk running the operation? Not really. I wanted to drive a race car like Satch. And, that was my desire at the time. But I know what side of the fence I belong on, and I'm on the right side. But that got my career started, just being in the family, and been in it ever since. I've been president since 1988 and love what I do. So I'm very fortunate.
Pass it on to Rhett Van Diver down here next. Yeah.
My name's Rhett Vandiver. I am a second generation driver, driven a little bit. My dad, his name was Jim Vandiver. Most of my stories are about my dad. And how did I fall in love with the sport? I kind of was forced to, because I was born into a racing family. So I have been a competitor's son. I've been a pit crew member. I've been a marketing director for a cup team. I've worn a lot of hats and done a lot of things in racing, and I still love the sport. I'm still a huge fan. People ask me who my favorite driver is, and other than Satch Worley, other than that, I say I don't really have a favorite driver. There's some I'm not too crazy about, but I love the sport and love to see the best in the sport. And Martinsville has done a fantastic job. I love that Martinsville's on the schedule, and twice a year we get to see people beat and bang fenders. Thanks.
And our final panelist is Warwick Scott. Warwick, give us the rundown of how you kind of got roped in all this.
Oh man, I was born in it, if you will. My grandfather is the NASCAR legend Wendell Scott. We hail from Danville, Virginia. And so I was born into a racing culture and a racing family. My father is Frank Scott, who legendary high school basketball coach from out in this area in Martinsville, Virginia. He was also my grandfather's crew chief and had been working in his pits since he was a young man. So much like Clay, I know where I need to fit in at. I'm more involved with the executive aspects of my grandfather's legacy and the licensing and the branding and things of that nature. But what I'm most proud of is that we have the Wendell Scott Foundation, which is a nonprofit that is founded in honor of my late grandfather and grandmother, Mary Scott. We utilize STEM education and iRacing and cultural enrichment to try to level the playing field for the youth of Southside Virginia.
All right. Well, we'll just stay with you, Warwick. What's some of the race day traditions that your family had that you've heard of, maybe from your father, your grandfather? What were some of their traditions they had?
Well, one thing was when my grandfather was racing, his mother she had the ability to, she could look down in the wild grass. She could pluck a 4-leaf clover. And so every race he went to when she was alive, she would tape a 4-leaf, she would send a 4-leaf clover, he would tape it to a dash. And so that's one family tradition. And then obviously the food was a big tradition. Unfortunately for my family, during my grandfather's NASCAR career, especially in the 50s and the 60s, they were not allowed to stop and get food or get gas or even oftentimes stay in hotels. And because of that, we had to be rather crafty at how we packed our foods, our beverages, our possessions, but it birthed some of the greatest meals, anybody could know. So country ham biscuits, potato salad, fried chicken, anything that kept, was in the car as they were traveling.
All right, Rhett, let's come to you. Same question there. Any unique traditions that your family had?
It's funny he mentioned, was your mother or your grandmother? Okay. My grandmother used to pack an incredible spread for race day. And what I remember more than anything was the iced tea, because it was half iced tea and half grape juice. If you've never tried it, wonderful. I do Arnold Palmer's all the time, but that was the best tea. The other thing I remember is always being late. My dad was notoriously late. And I remember one time in particular at Daytona, we were in a 10-passenger van, and there was some dispute, and NASCAR drivers are habitually hot-headed. And some guy behind, he cut him off or something. And so there was going to be a controversy, a physical controversy. So I was sitting in the back of the van. My dad was driving. He gets out. My brother was in the passenger seat. He gets out. My grandfather was in the middle seat. He gets out. Everybody going like, well, we'll show them. I'm in the back. I was probably 15. I start climbing over seats, and I go out. And by the time I got to the other truck, there were two mean-looking guys. It was over. And they said, well, we don't want to fight. My family was back in the van. I'm out there by myself. And these guys said, what do you want? I was like, nothing. I'm good. But there's always something going on the racetrack.
Clay, when you wake up Sunday morning, what's the tradition on race day?
Gosh, I was trying to think as work and yeah, but I don't, I can't think of anything that would be a true tradition. I go back to when I was a kid and, my mother worked at the Speedway, my aunt, my sister, the whole family worked there, as Chris knows. And we lived probably, 5 miles from the track. So family got there really early. I mean, like we do now, 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, I'm not going at 5 o'clock in the morning when I'm a kid. So they had to send somebody back over to pick me up to bring me back to the track early in the morning or later early in the morning. But probably some of you have seen pictures of me and my grandfather. At that time, he wore a red blazer, kind of like I've got on now with the Speedway logo on it. And I had one just like it. So I was his little, whatever you want to call it, but looked just like him. So I've tried to collect all those pictures that I could find and destroy them, but there's still a few floating around that I've threatened people's lives with. But anyway, that's about it.
Sash, did you have any traditions on race day?
Well, it's, I guess I started, my dad used to take me to races, from the time I was knee high, we'd go to South Boston, Bowman Gray, everywhere in this part of the country, I don't know how I got into it, but, when I turned, like 18, I started helping different ones around the county there to get into it, First thing you know, I was in it, and we got to go into all the races. I first drove for William Mason from up here to Oak Level. He was one of the old timers, and he was about like a second dad to me. And we, from the time that I got to drive for him, we were traveling. I mean, we were going up, Northeast, New Jersey, New York, everywhere. It wasn't just local, but I guess we had good enough luck or whatever, and William had some good cars back then, and everything just sort of continued on. But we were pretty much travelers, from the word go, and I guess we did that till I guess my last NASCAR race was '99. So we've been on the road a lot. It's I mean, I grew up in my dad's construction business, so we just sort of worked 4 or 5 days and then raced for the other 3 days, got back in time to go to work again on Monday. It was a good life, we just didn't, that was just a given, then we didn't, we weren't set up to do the racing thing like people are now. So we just raced for a lot of different people, with actually all the top people in this part of town, this part of the state. But, I drove for Clarence Steakhouse for 7 or 8 years, and then just everybody. And, we actually were lucky enough to win some races and just stayed out of trouble and made the best of it. It was a good life. We enjoyed everything we did and had some success. And, I guess that's about all you want.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, let's come to you now. I know you've done a little bit of everything, but what's the tradition?
Well, I probably need to give Clay some money, because when I first started, when I was younger, I used to jump the fence to hold the seats on the backstretch. So it's so that is true story, because back in the doubleheader days before the triple headers, I mean, if you didn't get there when the gates open, you weren't going to get a seat. And so I would always, Mom and them would get me a blanket, and I'd go down at 5:30, jump the fence, and save the top row. So appreciate you seeing me doing it. Turn two. That's a true statement. So that was my tradition, is to sneak in the racetrack. Sorry, but as Clay said, when you grew up in the sport, you have to do it all, and it doesn't matter what it is in Clay's world or my world or any of these worlds. You find that you're a master of none, but you learn how to do it all. And so the traditions, not only in licensing and souvenirs, my thing was to make sure we were prepared for souvenirs. We were prepared for the licensing side, for the fans, because people don't realize, everybody even sitting on this panel, is if one thing goes wrong, or if Clay runs out of hot dogs, that's tradition everybody should have, by the way. But if he runs out of hot dog, he's going to hear it. If Satch has a bad race, fans going to hear it. If everything's not prepared, people don't realize it affects everybody here. So you're part of the cog that goes on, and so everybody has to be on their game. And so the tradition is just to make sure that we prepared the best we could, and then I'll keep it short because I could go on. One of the cool things is when I was working for Earnhardt, he'd always go to bed about 9:30 and get up about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and start signing autographs. Well, he'd always call me every night. And the tradition on race day was he would always call to see how much money, we called it cabbage, that he had earned. And he was 70% of the industry back in the day. And so it was cool that he would run a race, sometimes win, sometimes wreck, some whatever, but he'd call me every single Sunday night, and we would have a chat about what transpired during the day, from sales standpoint to business to traffic to racing. And it was a good debrief, and I look forward to those days.
Well, let's just stay here with you, Chris, on that topic, because I knew you had a special friendship with Dale. We remember Dale on the track, right? Remember the competitor he was. What kind of person was he off the track? And then what were some of the things he was into that a lot of people may not know?
Well, I mean, Dale is just like every one of us. We're competitors to a certain nature, right? And because we want to strive to be the best that we can. And Earnhardt was the same way. I mean, everything he done, it didn't matter if it was fishing. It didn't matter if the airplane had to be the fastest. It didn't matter what he touched. He had to have the best of the best and gravitate towards that. And so he was just a fierce competitor. He loved hunting. We went every year. It's funny nowadays, when you win the championship, you got to go to New York. You got to, go here and there. Well, Dale told NASCAR, I'm going 5 days hunting. I'll see you on Thursday. So it would delay all of the celebration throughout all the, internet, all the other stuff that was going on, but he went and hunted. And so he loved it. He loved farming. He loved working. He had, a lot of people don't know, he had basically a farm of deer on his farm, 400 some acres, and he raised deer. The cool thing is everybody's sitting here, and it's funny because I know most everybody on this panel, I know your dad, because, I told you when I met you, I mean, I play for Jerry Mason, and I have a lot of respect for your dad, just a tremendous amount, to be perfectly honest with you. And we always sit at the Hall of Fame together when and I just love him. Clay, sitting here, I can't say enough about Clay. Just from a young age, he was probably the youngest person in the NASCAR world to run a track, and he learned from his granddad tremendously how to do it. And I still to this day says everybody needs to look at Clay and them of how they manage their tracks. It's just superb. And I'll say this about Satch, because he was my racing hero growing up. And I always, no matter where Satch was running in the 26 or the 07 or the 4 or whatever, Satch was the gauge for me in a modified world, which kind of brings me to where I am today, of owning the Smart Modified Tour. But a lot of it is because of what these guys have basically influenced me and your dad. So, I just want to say appreciate it to everybody. Thank you very much.
Red, I'm going to come to you with this one. Doing my research here, I ran across a very famous moment your father had at Darlington Speedway. So for everyone in the audience, let us know that moment and give us your side of the story on that.
Actually, I was the cause of that particular instance. My parents were divorced, and my mother had custody of me, but I ran away and lived with my dad. So they were trying to serve papers on my dad for custody of me. And They came to the garage area first, and they talked to Bill Gazaway at the time. He was an inspector, and they said, we need to get this guy. We need to arrest him. They said, or at least serve papers. They said, look, let him run the race. Just let him run the race. You can get him after the race. He's not going to go anywhere. They said, okay. So during the race, there are 2 uniformed police officers in our pits. So one of the most memorable thing is my uncle, back then they didn't have radio communication. My uncle had the pit board, and he wrote a big LAW on the pit board and was showing it as Dad went around. Well, he figured out what was happening. So the car was running worse and worse. It was the engine was getting ready to fail. So he said, I didn't know if the crew saw it or not, but the last lap he went by the pits, he said, see you, boys. Went down to 1 and 2, went down the back stretch and spun out going into the 3. And here's what someone told me the radio broadcast was. And Jim Vandiver spins out going into turn 3 to breeze out the day's 4th caution. Now, here at Darlington Speedway, we have, and Jim Vandiver's going over the wall. They thought he had heat stroke or something. He spun out, got out of his car, ran across the track, and went down. He said, it's crazy inside the track. So many people. He said outside the track, it's like a ghost town. And it was lucky. He said right where he went, someone had snuck in. Sorry, Clay. Snuck in, and the fence was down, so he could go under the fence. He hitched a ride. My uncle was distraught, and he said, "Oh, I know he's locked up. I know for sure." Well, he called and paged him from the garage area. He said, "Man, I'm at home having a beer watching football." Nothing got to my dad. And one other thing, since he started it about allegedly one time, it wasn't at Martinsville, but allegedly one time, me and my brother were checking out my dad's trunk of his car at Metrolina and went into the track. And then my dad popped the trunk and we got out. And it just so happened that Donnie Allison was also there at a race, and he saw us emerge from the trunk, and he's never let us forget that. So funny. Pop the trunk and 2 teenagers get out of it. So things happened.
I like that. Clay, I'm taking notes of how to sneak in on Sunday. I know, right? Yeah. Clay, can you give us your best Clay Earl story?
There are numerous ones, but Chris is involved with this one. I told you, since I grew up on the business side of it, and I really wanted to do the racing side of it, I got my first go-kart when I was probably 6 years old, just a go-kart from Sears, actually. And probably these guys here had one too. But he allowed us to have go-karts at the Speedway. Me and a good friend of mine, Chris, was involved with it. It was about 4 or 5 of us. And one of my good buddies from school, we appointed him to be the flagman. Actually, we had 3 different tracks within the Speedway. We had a short track, and that was 4 lines long on the front stretch. So the outside wall was the front stretch, and the pit wall was the back stretch. This is a good track. Then we had an intermediate sized track down in the infield. So we did a different track every time. But the guy that I had doing the flagging, he wasn't there to throw a caution if we had a wreck or something like that. He was there to throw a caution if he saw Granddaddy coming through the gate up there watching us, because he didn't want us racing. He made it clear, you can ride, but don't race. Well, we're not going to go down there and ride. We're going to race. And, Chris, you remember Ray Powell? He had a car, and this was back in the day of Cale Yarber and the Holly Farms car, yellow and that pukey color, yellow and whatever. And he had a Cale Yarber sticker on his back bumper. So we'd go down the straightaways just scrubbing that back bumper, trying to take the Cale Yarber sticker off of it. But we had a great time. But that was one thing that he was adamant against. In fact, that went through, when I grew up, I did some racing. And he was adamant against it. He said, and I'll tone this down, if I ever catch you in a race car, I'll kick your you-know-what to the moon. And if you think about it, he was involved in racing from the very beginning. So probably a lot of his friends didn't make it. He lost a lot of friends during that time. So he certainly didn't want me doing it. He had a game plan for my life, and it wasn't sitting behind the wheel of a race car. So I had numerous, when I was racing go-karts, I would change my name when I went someplace. When I ran stock cars and I ran Caraway, it was something to go in his office on Monday morning and get chewed out. I mean, he reamed me really good. We're worked for him, and he was probably harder on me than anybody else. And I didn't understand it then. I understand it now. And Warwick, you're probably the same way. And Red, you understand. But I remember he caught me one time sleeping in a wheelbarrow after lunch in the maintenance shop. That didn't turn out too good. For those of you that are familiar with the track, we were the first ones to put concrete in the turns. And Sats, you remember that. So first lane was concrete, and we did that by hand. We didn't have machinery to do it, and two of these hands participated in putting it down. And there I was right out of school. I was always a scrawny little run anyway, and I didn't, pushing that screed and float and all that stuff, pushing that concrete was tough. And the guy that was on the other side of it, he was a big brute, Clarence. You remember Clarence? Yeah. So he was over there, and his arms were flabbing as he was pushing the 2x6, was about 12 feet long. So I knew he wasn't pushing it hard. I was doing all the work. Here comes Granddaddy riding up in his Pontiac. He rolls the window down. It was hot as you know what, and he had the air conditioner on. He rolls the window down. He's like, Clarence, don't let him ride that thing. There I was pushing my guts out. He was getting on my case, but it was, he taught me a lot, and that was fun. But I ran Daytona and Talladega the last few years that I drove a race car, and I told my crew chief, I said, I got to get home and go over to Roselawn and pay up, because I know he's spinning in his grave knowing that I'm running places like that. But he hated it. So I survived though.
Warwick, I'm going to come to you next, and I'm going to preface this question by saying, save the Jacksonville Speedway story, but what's one of the best stories you have on your grandfather there?
Okay. Couple of stories. Allegedly, I'll do allegedly. Let's talk moonshine. My grandfather, naturally, for those who don't know, was like many of the guys, he was a bootlegger. He was a pretty good one too. There's a section in Danville called Fall Creek. It was most notably called the Fall Creek Whiskey Run. It's a snake road, it's real tight. He was hauling moonshine one night. Had a roadblock set up for him at the end of this snake road. And so he threw his moonshine car in reverse with the police chasing them, backed out through the snake road. He got to the top of the road, threw it in a 180, took off through Danville. He didn't go to his garage that the law enforcement knew about. He had a secret garage. He went to a secret garage, and he snatched the engine out of the car. Police showed up to our home house, wrote him a citation, chastised him. We know it was you. We know it was you. In those days, Danville had night court. So he had to go to night court. And the law enforcement was in there, and they were saying, Wendell, we called Wendell. He was hauling the moonshine, and Wendell was saying, my grandfather was saying, well, that wasn't me. I don't know who you're talking about. Long story short, the judge says, and this is in a documentary called Scott. Okay, this is produced by, narrated by Senator John Warner. The judge says, also, let me add into my story to authenticate my story. Allegedly, they interviewed a gentleman named Homer Price, who was actually the policeman that was chasing him that night. He's passed away since then. And the judge told them, next time you bring Wendell in my courtroom, I want you to bring him and the engine. and they sent him back out. And then my last story, real quick story, just to show you my grandfather's impact. On the way to a Martinsville race one year, coming through Charlotte, coming through Greensboro. I got a brand new Yukon Denali. Man, I'm gunning and I'm flying. I get a speeding ticket. Me and my wife together get a speeding ticket. So state trooper takes my driver's license registration, walks back to his car, does his thing, comes back to me, looks at my last name. He says, Scott. He said, you ain't related to the Scott out of Danville, are you? And I said, I got a little embarrassed. I said, yes, sir. Wendell's my grandfather. He said, Wendell's your grandfather? I said, yes, sir. He says, step on the car for a minute. Look at my wife. My wife is looking at me like, she's like, don't get out of the car, don't get out of the car. He gets me out of the car, asks me to come back to his police car. And he pops the glove box, and he shows me that he used to be in Richard Petty's pit crew. And he actually had a picture of my grandfather with him. And so he didn't give me a ticket. I wish my wife was here, but what he did do was he said, "So you like to drive fast, huh?" I said, "Well, I just was trying to get to the race. I'm trying to get to the race." And so he gave me a police escort. And he dropped me off right where the North Carolina Virginia line is. And we were probably going a good 95, 100 miles per hour when I was following the police car.
Allegedly, right?
There you go. Allegedly. So that's my little story.
That's great. Technology is a big part of motorsports, and pushing that technology to the limit for a competitive advantage is a big part too. So I'll just open it up, and anybody can jump in here. Just kind of wave at me. I'll let you. What's some of the craziest legal and illegal things you've seen a team use to try to win a race? You want to jump in there first, Ash? Go ahead.
I always ran illegal. Anyway.
Every race but drive there.
No, it's, I guess, the most illegal stuff was back, in the early days. They just didn't have the technology or whatever, but when you came to a place like Martinsville or whatever, you pretty well towed the line. So I'm sure it's been a whole lot of things that was pushed through there, but I guess we never were in a position to do that with some of the cars we ran down there. But over the years, it's been a lot of stuff, and I can't really remember anything we actually got away with that would have made a difference. We people I drove for, whatever, we just, I guess did good to get there with what was supposed to be legal, and make the best of it. But I don't really know of anything that I can recall that was way out of line.
Anybody else have anything? Brett?
Something to add. My dad drove the number 31 Dodge back when Richard Petty, David Pearson in particular, was driving. And at that time, you could not block off the front radiator because it gave you too much of an aero advantage. So they're always watching the competitors. This actually isn't against my dad. It's against someone else. They always watch all the competitors. So as they were going through inspection, he was watching the 21 car with an eagle eye. Then the 31 comes in, and the guy has this coat hanger. He sticks through the grill, and Daddy said, whoa, you don't need to do that. You didn't do it to the number 21. The inspector said, look, this is the number 31. You just worry about this car. So the easiest way to cheat is to pay off an official. Just saying. And another one wasn't really cheating, but my dad, back in the day, they ran really small spoilers, like a 1-inch spoiler on his Dodge. He was at Talladega, and he was running, and he said, I bet I could run faster if we take that spoiler off. And my uncle's like, I think that's a bad idea. He said, I can handle it. So we went out qualifying, and I think practice for qualifying. I'm not sure. First lap, he made it. He was like 2-3 miles an hour faster. Second lap, he spun out. He said he put like a $50 dent in the right quarter panel. Came in, my uncle just shaking his head said, "You're crazy." So there's always, back in the day, there was a lot less technological. The inspection process was much easier. And there was a huge gray area. So there was a lot of creative engineering that went on. I'm sure Wendell didn't have anything.
Yeah, I had one. My grandfather used to sometimes buy things for the race car from other NASCAR drivers that were sponsored. When they would change the cars, he would swoop in and get a good car, take it back to the shop, modify it. And so he tells me the story of how he gets a car from an unnamed NASCAR driver, whom I will not name, and he is modifying the inside of the car. And he has to do some welding, and he cuts the roll cage. And as he cuts the roll cage, all of these fabricated metal beads start falling out of the roll cage. So I think they could tell you all that. I think it's a certain threshold where you're not supposed to have those metal beads fabricated, but somebody had some tricks in tow. He just didn't know he didn't know the trick was rigged. That's a story that I remember. Remember him telling us. And then when he would run his moonshine cars, he came back from war. He served General Patton's army in the Red Ball Express. So he picked up a lot of interesting tricks like nitrous oxide. He had two gas tanks on his car. He had a toggle switch that would short his brake light out. So when the police were chasing him at night, he could flip his brake light off and they wouldn't know if he was going left or right. So some of the stuff that he was up to.
I've seen several things here. As Rhett pointed out, the inspection process now is much more stringent. You don't get away with much, and when you do, you really get the heavy hammer laid on you. But back in the day, when I worked on the maintenance department at the track, every afternoon or after a race, we'd sweep the track, and down at the bottom of the track against the curb, you couldn't imagine all the BBs that were laying against the curb. And what those BBs were, the inspection process before the race was different than after. So you had to be X amount on your ride height. After the race, it didn't matter. So what they did, they put BBs in a little package and put it in the spring. So the car would go through the sticks and it would be the right height. Well, the first time they dove off into turn one at speed, it busted that bag and the BBs came out. So you're down on the bottom. I mean, they've always been smarter than the NASCAR officials anyway. That's what they do. Another thing, when they were pushing the cars up to line them up before the race, the crew would be behind the car pushing on the spoiler, and whoever was sitting in there steering it, when they got where they're going, they'd jam on the brakes, and that pushed the spoiler up. So again, that gave them an advantage. The spoiler had a different angle, so it made a big difference. How many of you remember Marty Robbins, the country music singer? I know many of you do. I remember one time at Talladega, he was passing everybody. I mean, he ran for fun. He loved racing, and he ran select races, usually the big tracks like Talladega. And this was back when Wendell was running, but he was passing everybody just like they were going backwards. When the race was over, they nailed him for his carburetor was much, much, much bigger than anybody else's, and it wasn't legal. I said, Marty, why did you even do that? He said, I wanted to see what it felt like to pass Richard Petty.
Yeah. Before Junior Johnson passed away here a few years ago, I got to spend a whole day with him talking about this, and some of you bringing up some of the things that's already been said. I know he brought up one time when Darrell Waltrip won the Winston and he blew the motor going by the start finish line. He told Darrell to, rev it up, blow it. And Darrell's like, why? We got to race it. He said, do it. And he blew it up because he knew the motor was illegal and they couldn't inspect it when it was blown up. And so I remember a lot of those stories. And, he actually brought up the whole Fireball Roberts at Charlotte. He got in a fire, and he died, burn up. But the reason is because back then they were putting fuel in the roll cages, and he had a wreck in the second lap of the race, and Junior said that the fuel ignited, and that's what burnt Fireball up and passed. So I mean, they were going to the extremes to have that advantage, because as Clay and everybody knows, I mean, you wanted anything you can. And I know somebody, I won't mention any names, but somebody won a prestigious race by going like 12 more miles than everybody else at a big race. And ironically, that person told me that they had fuel in the fire extinguisher. So they had run a line up to the carburetor and nobody checked an inspection. And they had the fuel in the fire extinguisher. And that's what gave them the 11 laps to win. So it goes on. It happens. I mean, heck, in the modified world, we had something happen in the last couple of weeks, but every driver out there is looking for an advantage, and they're going to do a lot to get it done. And the drivers know nothing about them. I get that, but those crew are doing everything they can to bend the rules to make it work. So it happens.
I got one more, Junior Johnson, to show you how deviously genius he was. People watch what people do, and Junior Johnson's cars always ran well. This was like in the late 80s. He would intentionally buy parts from a vendor, and people would find out. He was like secret. He'd buy these parts knowing they were substandard parts so that people would buy their parts from them and their engines would break. When secretly he bought them from another vendor and didn't let anybody know he was running X brand instead of Y brand. That's how devious these guys were. Brilliant.
That's great. That's great. So Clay, I'm going to come to you. Martinsville's not just a good racetrack. It's also has one of the best trophies in sports. And winners of the race have been receiving a grandfather clock from Ridgeway Clocks for years now. How did that tradition become about, and why do you think it's become one of the most desired trophies in motorsports?
That started, my grandfather actually started that one in 1964. In fact, Fred Lorenzen he won the first race that gave a clock. And that particular clock is in the Martinsville Speedway display at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So it's still around. David Reagan owns that clock now, but they loaned it to us to put in there. At the time when that tradition got started, and it was never intended to be such an iconic trophy or even a tradition. It just, Granddaddy wanted something special for the drivers, not just a regular old cup or, chrome looking trophy. And Ridgeway Clock was just down the road, 3 miles, 4 miles, something like that. And they built those grandfather clocks. So we hooked up with them and started giving clocks away. I think now it's got to be the most cherished and sought after trophy in all of motorsports. It's funny, Mike Skinner, who was a really good racer in the truck series, we didn't always give it to every division that ran at Martinsville. It was always mainly for the Cup guys. Now, obviously, the double headers with Modified and Sportsman, they got them. But as far as Saturday races and things like that, we didn't. Then we changed it. Well, if you win Martinsville, you need to get a clock. And that's what we did. So Mike Skinner won the last race that we didn't give a clock. So every time I see him, he harps on me. I can't say what he says, but he's ill that he didn't get a clock. So, we've got these little replica identical clocks. So I'm going to give him one of those sometimes. And then here's your clock. But that's how that got started. It's kind of like the hot dog. It's you don't talk to somebody too long about Martinsville where you don't mention the clock or the hot dog. Neither one was intended to be what it is now. But, thankfully we have something with a clock and an iconic signature product like, some stadiums do. So pretty fortunate with that.
All right. You got something to say?
Yeah, I got a clock, but that's a pretty big fight there for a while. We the guy that I was driving for in Connecticut was racing down here when I started. And he, actually he worked on his car up here, William Mason's garage when we were there. And I'd known him years, but anyway, we got together and I'd never won a race over there when they were giving everybody a clock until I was driving his car in, what was that, 91, I guess. And you could see him, he just green around the gills there, when they came up with that thing, and he kept making comments, and I said, well, I've been racing down here about as long as you have. I'm going to get the first. And he never did give it up. But actually, he ended up getting one because honestly, somebody wrote, he told Donnie before the race, if we win this race, that's my flop. So we got one and proud of it.
Awesome. So before electronic scoring became about, a lot of times there were some races where the scoring was questioned. So I know two down here at the end have a couple of stories. So Warwick, let's start with you and talk a little bit about your grandfather's victory in Jacksonville that was taken away and then it's since come back and NASCAR acknowledged it just
Yeah. So my grandfather, December 1st, 1963, he became the first African-American team owner or driver to win in a Cup Series race. You were talking about ingenuity earlier. So what some people don't realize is the way he was able to achieve that victory was he actually he de-shocked his car. He put you all can correct me if I'm wrong here. There are certain shocks on the car that are more flexible. I think it's the rear shocks. So when he was qualifying, he recognized that Jacksonville Speedway at the time, it's no longer there. It's been torn down. He recognized that there were lots of potholes and dips in the track. And so he changed his shock system in order for him to be able to absorb the bumps during the race. And a lot of the other drivers were hitting those potholes and stuff and the cars falling all apart. And so he was able to, de-shock his car that way. During that race, whether intentional or unintentional, he actually lapped the entire field. NASCAR says he lapped the field twice. My grandfather says he lapped the field 3 times. But whatever the case may be, at the end of the race, he was not awarded his victory because of we'll just say traditions of the time. He was not awarded his victory. He did receive his purse, but it wasn't until all of the fans and everyone was gone. But, his legacy, persevered beyond that moment. He was highly prolific in the 60s. 61 and 66, he finished 3rd in NASCAR for point stand for ownership. He won 128 Sportsman and Modified races before he began the Race Cup. He was the Virginia Sportsman of the Year in 1953. And so, it's sometimes back in those days without the benefit of technology, it's kind of hard to keep up with those laps sometimes with excitement and different things that happen. But whatever the case may be, I think he put a little extra sauce on it. So like I said, he went around 2 extra laps just to make sure, that his victory solidified. So we're real proud. We're real proud.
Red, I'm gonna come to you. Your father's best finishing cup was a runner-up at Talladega, if my research is right. But I know he
won that race.
There's some controversy surrounding it. Yep. So for those who don't know what I'm talking about, give us your side of the story there.
This was the first race ever at Talladega. They had a big problem with the tires separating or blowing out. So at the time, there was a drivers union, the Professional Drivers Union Association, PDA, and a lot of the named drivers boycotted the Talladega race. Because of that, my uncle was working for Ray Fox. I think Buddy Baker was their driver at the time. I'm not sure about that. But once the other drivers boycotted it, my dad got the opportunity to drive Ray Fox's number 3 Dodge. Dominated the race, led tons of laps. Here's the kicker. And by the way, scoring back in the day, because I've been a scorer too, they had a numeral clock, a digital clock. And as your car came by, you wrote the number down. And they'd have to go back and check all the scoring, all the different people. So if they're not looking at it, you can just keep doing the same lap times. If it's 30 seconds a lap, you just keep writing that number down regardless of where your car is. There's ways you can do it. What happened during that race? My dad, every time he pitted, was under caution. When Richard Brickhouse, who won the race, they say, when he pitted, 2 or 3 times he pitted under green. The gist of it was Richard Brickhouse was in the new Dodge Daytona with the nose and the wing on the back. My dad was in an old Charger 500. And we think, because NASCAR was in with the factories, they wanted a Dodge Daytona to win the first ever Talladega race. So how it came down was Brickhouse was faster. He passed my dad. Our contention was he was getting back in the lead lap. NASCAR said that was the pass for the win. They gave Brickhouse the win. And the ramifications are huge because my dad raced for several years after that. He didn't retire till 83. Had he won, no telling what, I've heard the Petties looked at him as a driver. The Wood brothers actually looked at him for a driver at one point. If he had raced, that would have put me in a race car. I mean, it would have been huge for our family, but yes, we still dispute that to this day.
Jog my memory. Historical factoid, Jacksonville 200, that race counted for the 1964 Cup season, even though it happened in 63. And I just was on the phone with Jim Campbell from Chevy just the other day, and I reminded him that was Chevy's only victory as a manufacturer. that entire NASCAR season. But what Red is saying also applies to us. There's a book on my grandfather called Hard Driving. In it, he talks about having meetings with Lee Iacocca. And he was told that if he put forth a good showing during that 63 season, that he would be able to finally attain sponsorship. And so he went out and won. But because his victory was not celebrated and acknowledged, it actually scared away other sponsors, because they felt like every time he won, that it would be the same dynamic. And so I say that to point out that, the entire sport of NASCAR itself has evolved tremendously. Is there still a lot more to do? Absolutely. But the sport has evolved itself tremendously, from now to then. So, and Martinsville has played a huge role in my family's legacy. I tell people when we do interviews and stuff like that, that's our home gymnasium. You know what I mean? And so 75 years to the day this weekend, I mean, what a contribution, to our area in the South Side. So although it may not be time for that, I just say kudos to you and your family for our contribution. And Jesse Jones is historically from Danville. The Jesse Jones family is from Danville, and I think it's great synergy.
Well, I'm going to come back for some hot dog questions here in a little bit. So, but let's start with you, Clay. This weekend gets kicked off Thursday night with the modified. So what do you think makes a modified race in Martinsville so special?
Modifieds have always been my favorite tour by far. For those of you that are not familiar with the modifieds, you need to come out Thursday and watch them. They've always been the most powerful. Now with the next gen Cup car, I'm not sure if some of these stats are still true with the wider tire that the next gen car has, but at one point, just think about this. A much wider tire than a Cup car, a lot more horsepower, and half the weight. So put all those components together and you've got a fast race car. They've always been the fastest cars that run in Martinsville. I mean, for a long time. And I know since the issues we had back in the 80s, they did do a few things to actually slow them down. Not really a restrictor plate, but the carburetor and the gear ratio and things like that. They didn't want them running as fast as they were. And at the time we had those problems, it was actually the car that was a problem. But we've clocked them doing 130 down the straightaway. Now that, excuse me, that is flying for a race car. But there's nothing that's more special than standing close to them when they fire up for the start of a race. I mean, it just rumbles in your chest, and it's always been really special to me. In fact, Chris, you'll be aware of this, and Satch, you're keenly aware. We're having the Flying 11 Ray Hendricks car, a replica of it, and actually it was one of his cars at the track Thursday night. It'll be on display, and it'll make a ceremonial lap before the race. So it's always been a great. It's a true race car. Let's just put it that way. It's a true race car.
Satch, you were voted one of the top 50 drivers of all time in the modified series. What do you think it takes to compete at the highest level in modified racing?
Well, it's modified drivers are always traveled some, but they're still pretty much territorial. We got, I learned way back as soon as I got started, that if we stayed here, like running at the stadium and some of them places, you got specialists down there that are really good, but when you go somewhere else, they're not so good, So I think that was part of the deal where we did okay was because we went. I guess we've run on just about every racetrack east of Mississippi from Maine to Florida, and that covers a whole lot of ground, for a modified guy. But really, it's you got to be exposed to those places to, and it's just an infinite amount of difference between every racetrack in the country. I mean, they're all around and they come back where they start, but it's a lot of difference. And I guess if you can get exposed and get to where you can figure out what the difference is and make it work and be successful there, then that's what puts you on the top. You got to be there every week.
All right, Chris, I'm going to ask you this here. We're going to stay on the topic of modified. I know you're the director of the Smart Modified Tour. Give us a little rundown of what you guys are trying to accomplish with that tour. And then if you had a wish list of tracks you could add to your schedule, what would they be?
Oh, well, I mean, the modifieds are the best series, period. NASCAR does a really good job with the wheel and modified tour. Of course, Clay and M showcase it. We have probably 6 or 7 of our guys that run weekly with us that go over there and compete against them. Matt Hirschman is great. He competes on, both tours. We have just Bobby Labonte, Ryan Newman. We kicked off North Wilkesboro's return with the Smart Modifieds and put on a great event. It had a great crowd, which we expect a lot bigger crowd Thursday night with the talent and what racing means to Martinsville. But the Smart Modified Tour is basically a sister tour with NASCAR because we're the only ones that keep pretty much the same rules. I just had a conversation with Priest and them this week. They're wanting Tri-Track and Monaco and some of these open modified shows at Stafford to all be consistent because there's 4 tours out there that people can run, but the only 2 that regulate body panels, quarter panels, motors, and everything else with the spec motors is us and NASCAR. And so we just want less of a headache to be able to run both. We want it to be legal because some of what's going on up north is, they're deflecting the side panels. They're, bringing air back to the wings and air dams, and the motors. They're running boosters where us and NASCAR run straight spec motors or built motors with the 390, which equalizes it all. So what we're just trying to do with the tour is give the Southern Modifieds an opportunity to have a platform. They've not had that. It's not been very well received in the South. It's credibility, which is, what I try to bring to every racetrack and every competitor and every driver is, do what you say you're going to do and be credible. No different than what your granddaddy taught you, no different what your dad taught you, and no different than what your granddad passed down. And so that's what we're trying to do with the tour. I mean, look, Clay said it a few minutes ago. I mean, and Satch did. The South and its Mid-Atlantic region has more racetracks than anywhere else in the country, anywhere. And it's done that because that's where racing generated from. And so, I mean, you can go within a 4-hour radius and run 11 different tracks. And so the place everybody in a modified wants to run is Martinsville. I would love to, but let's be honest. NASCAR has their own series, and I totally understand what Clay and M's doing, and we would love to do it. But at the same time, I understand what they're trying to do with their series, sponsors and everything else. That would be a wish list. We have a lot of people calling us. I mean, we Lonesome Pines being sold. I know the owner or the person who's buying it, so they want us to run there. Kingsport's knocking down the door for us to run. I mean, Little Rock. I mean, I've been talking to Justin and those guys for 6 months, and they're actually putting up the grandstand for us, to be perfectly honest with you. And we're testing there next Friday. But we will showcase the modifieds because we love it so much. We will showcase our talent and our drivers and our racing compared to anybody because, as Clay pointed out, if you ever witnessed it, and hopefully you'll witness this Thursday at the Speedway, it's ground pounders. It's I can't even fathomly tell you how exciting that car is when it cranks up and when you're sitting in it, because I drove a little bit. I hold the steering wheel is what I tell people. There's no other feeling. It's an overgrown go-kart that has 650 horsepower, and you could actually see everything working in front of you, which is amazing. But they're very skilled drivers that drive these things. One mistake, you wreck, and it hurts, and it costs a lot of money. So it's not only exciting, it's kind of like being in a jet plane out of control each and every lap. And that's the best way I can explain it. So that's kind of the overview of where we're at with the sport. It's growing tremendously. It's doing extremely well. And, look, we just appreciate what, everybody's done for us to give this platform, but can't wait for Thursday night to see these guys. Bobby Labonte is going to be there. I mean, you got a field of fields with cars coming. I can't wait to see the race.
One more, we'll do a couple more questions here, and then I'm going to move on to what I'm calling our rapid fire section. But the first one is, if you guys can touch on, what do you think is the biggest difference surrounding securing sponsorships now versus securing sponsorships 20, 30 years ago? Anybody want to jump in there first? Rhett, go ahead.
I was marketing director for BAM Racing for a number of years. And if you think the competition is fast and furious on the track, it's hard to approach a single company who can afford a racing effort that hasn't been approached by 3 or 4 teams. The sponsorship market is crazy. The viewership, unfortunately, has gone down a little bit, but I think it's back on an uptick. So with what NASCAR has done with the sport, I think it's a great product to watch. So, but compared to what it was, I mean, it was go find a local guy who had a body shop, and I remember the sign painter coming to my dad's shop, and I was so fascinated by painting the signs. And now with wraps and paint schemes change every week. There's some Xfiniti cars who literally run a different sponsor every week. There's one in Cup, BJ McLeod. He runs a different sponsor almost every week. Takes a lot of money. NASCAR has moved in the right direction, though, with this latest car, because the costs are down for the teams. But it's a dog eat dog world for sponsorships for sure.
I'm more I'm not involved at the level that some of these gentlemen are. I'm more involved with what NASCAR is doing with diversity in regards to sponsorship and helping close the cultural gap that exists in NASCAR. Naturally, it can be challenging because depending on which sponsor, which entity, they're looking at targeted consumers. The social media presence piece is huge. But thankfully, there's always new money. And there's new companies, new corporations, technologies playing a big role. And so sponsors can oftentimes feel as though they can they're getting more bang for their buck on a grassroots level. If you think about minorities in motorsports, there are not a lot of entities or third parties that power the motorsport experience for minorities. When I say minorities, I do not just mean African Americans. There's Urban Racing School in Philadelphia that has been doing wonderful work for years. And then there's Wendell Scott Foundation. Like I said, we use race car simulation as our tool, but it's highly competitive as the world changes, as the world evolves. It gets more competitive, but thankfully, I feel as though the worlds of entertainment in Hollywood are embracing NASCAR more than ever. I see NASCAR blending in all sports. You don't see the flip on it. You'll see NFL doing collaborations with NASCAR. You can see NBA doing some collaboration. You can see that duality, and that's the wonderful thing about NASCAR. I try to provide African-American celebrities and entertainers with their first NASCAR experience. Many have never been to a race and don't know the experience. Naturally, when you come to a race, there's a lot to learn and a lot to know. And so I'm learning that sponsors are now beginning to put their dollars towards the pre-race experience in order to hook the consumer and to drive them to events that don't just happen on Sunday, but happen on Thursday, Friday and Saturday.
Well, I think Rhett pointed it out pretty spot on as far as sponsorships now versus what they were back in the day of Purelator on the Wood Brothers, STP on Petty Enterprises, First National City Travelers checks on one of Hale Yarber's cars. There weren't many, but now, and what, Rhett, probably 20 plus million if you wanted to sponsor all year long.
I hear it.
Yeah. So, it fluctuates, but that's a lot of money, and we're just losing. You talk about sponsors that, well, hardly any team has a sponsor that runs all year. There is one. And the one that did, M&M's, after next week, they're gone. It's just hard to have a sponsor that can pony up that kind of dollars all year long. But to answer your question, Adam, I think the biggest difference now with drivers, years ago, they had to be good behind the wheel. Now they have to be as good in the boardroom as they are behind the wheel. You've got to represent that sponsor because they're paying you 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. They're not paying you just for what you do on a Sunday afternoon. They want you to represent them, and you've got to be able to do it. And for some drivers, that's hard. I mean, drivers are competitive. They want to drive a race car. But most of them realize this is so critical to a race team, to their career. It has changed quite a bit from years ago.
Great. Thank you. So, all right, let's go to rapid fire here. So basically, I'm going to ask a question, spit out your answer as quick as you can. All right. Chris, I'm going to start with you. What's the wildest thing you've ever seen in victory lane?
Oh, somebody cheating. I'll quickly, it's supposed to be rapid fire,
Yeah,
right?
sure. Go ahead.
I seen somebody actually do something to the car and they got caught and they got suspended. I mean, it was pretty blatant.
Satch, wildest thing you've ever seen in victory lane?
Rapid fire is not too good here. Nothing wild when I was involved, but most everything we were ever involved was pretty up front. It's weekly shows and weekly people, so wasn't anything real wild.
What's your best victory lane?
My best,
Yeah. Rock race champion.
Yep.
Rock.
Yeah. Yeah, we won in the last race champions at Pocono. Yep. That's my big one.
I'll make this as quick as possible, and I'll give you a little tidbit of information you can look on TV this weekend and maybe see it. Maybe not the wildest, but one of the most memorable was Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s last victory here. And for those of you who don't know, our victory lane is on a flatbed trailer. We bring it out to the start finish line and the backdrop's on it and the driver and the crew gets on it. They were jumping up and down so much. I mean, I've never seen a celebration and a happier driver and team as they were that almost night. But the tidbit of information I'll give you, going back to the clock, we've got the skinniest guy on our maintenance department standing behind that clock, holding it up so it won't fall over when people jump up and down on the trailer. So maybe you might see him. You look real close, and if you see him, then that's not good because he's not supposed to be seen, but he's back there holding the clock up.
Well, he didn't say it had to be personal experience. So the wildest thing I've seen in victory lane was an IndyCar race. I told you I'm a race fan. When AJ Foyt backhanded Ari Lyondike. That's the one that sticks out for me.
Wildest thing, Denny and Logano. Denny and Joey Logano when they got into that dust up in Martinsville. I mean, here. That was seeing some wild stuff, but we know when Denny gets upset. Who knows? Crash.
Yeah, we found that out last year, right?
Right.
All right, Clay, real quick, this is a rapid fire, but if you can, give us the story behind the famous Martinsville hot dog. And at what point did you realize, hey, we got a tradition here?
Well, I didn't, and Warwick said it right. It's a Jesse Jones hot dog. So that started years and years ago, and most of you are familiar with go to a ball game. You get a hot dog, there's nothing on it. You go over here to the condiment stand and put everything that you want on it. Here, it's made fresh. It's mustard, chili, onion, slaw, unless you want to change it. So it's just that's just why it's special. We actually it's so special, and people really love that thing. So on a good weekend, we will sell probably 60,000 hot dogs, and we did a little deal to figure out how many laps the hot dogs would go around the track. I can't remember how many it was, but it's amazing how iconic that hot dog is. And we changed it one time, 2 times actually. Chris, am I taking?
Yeah, I was going there. Go ahead.
So let me give you a quick story on that.
Yeah, tell them who called you.
Yeah, well, the year before we changed it, the racetrack came up, in turn 3. We had a hole in turn 3. This was Cup race. So I get a call from the tower and they say, how about going to the elevator, pick up Hilton and go down on the track and see what's going on? My heart just dropped to my feet. That's not a good thing to be told. Go pick up the president of NASCAR and go down the track and see what's going on. All the cars were stopped. All of our track service vehicles are over there. So go down there and yeah, it was a big chunk of concrete up. It went through Jeff Gordon's grill. So obviously he was not a happy camper. Allegedly. Allegedly. Actually, yes. Yes, that is true. I did. So it went through his grill. He wasn't a happy camper. Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't bother him. He came up, he said, just put a cone up, we'll go around it. Honest God, that's what he said. Put a cone up and we'll drive around it. So anyway, moving forward 12 months, we changed hot dogs. And this was a new caterer that was part of International Speedway Corporation who owned the Speedway. So we changed, and that didn't go over well at all. I mean, usually you've heard the tale of drivers going to the big red hauler after a race to either raise cane or get cane raised to them one way or the other. They were going to the hauler that morning complaining they've changed the hot dog. It was more turmoil over changing the hot dog than it was the track coming up the year before. And that's the honest truth. The guy that was a president of the catering company, he called me. He said, if Mr. France calls you, tell him I've got boots on the ground. We're correcting it. It'll be fixed before lunchtime. Please tell him. I mean, he was worried about his job, and he's worried about Mr. France finding out about it and, booting him. But they did get it corrected, but it was, we'll never do that again.
All right, so back to the rapid fire here. What are the most hot dogs you've ever consumed during a race weekend? Chris, you got a microphone.
I'm not going to say how many I had, but Dale Earnhardt would average 14 a day. I would go get them for him, and he wouldn't let nobody eat them but himself. So mine's probably 4. That's about it.
Mine probably topped out to 6. I couldn't eat a lot before a race, so it's after the race.
Probably 2 for me. I don't eat on race weekend. too wound up.
Maybe 4.
I say 6.
Okay. Are y'all being honest, or this allegedly? This
depends on how long I'm in the race.
Okay.
If I'm there multiple days, multiple hot dogs.
All right. Besides Martinsville, what's your favorite track to watch a race? Either TV or in person, doesn't matter.
Favorite track. I like Daytona.
All right, we'll just work back the line this way.
Definitely Daytona, especially Daytona 500 because of prestige. However, honorable mention to Indy, the oval, not the road course.
Daytona.
Yeah, I take Daytona. It's got everything.
Daytona, no doubt.
All right. Got a winner there, huh? All right, Chris, I'll start with you. We'll just go right back. For someone who's attending their first race this weekend, what's something you'd tell them to watch for that the average person may not pay attention
to? Actually, where everybody parks. It's a game at Martinsville. And, Martinsville is one of those, everybody's coming and you're fitting 65,000 people and everybody has a game, including the drivers. And it's kind of fun to watch. I've heard all the stories. Bob Labonte used to dress up in Mark Martin's clothes to go up the street to get in the car. And, people park over there back behind Wendy's or the Speedway, and the game getting out is pretty fun, but there's no bad experience at Martinsville. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, it's my home track, but when everybody goes, I go all the races across the country, and they ask me where I live in Martinsville, and immediately they talk about hot dogs, and they talk about it's the only track that there's something going on every lap that's not being seen on TV. It could be happening 15th to 18th to 20th. And so there's excitement. And so, hey, just enjoy the event. It's a great pleasure to be in Martinsville and to just enjoy it.
Satch, one thing an average person may not pay attention to while watching a race that you would say, hey, you should watch this.
Well, I don't know. It's you got to be a race car driver, I think, or be exposed to it to see things, especially on the bigger tracks. You know, like you can't. People just see cars going around, you know, and you got to be able to see this little move, that little move. You know, I guess I catch myself telling my wife at home when we watching the race the last few weeks, you know, say, well, he got him right there and he ain't passed him yet, but he got him, you know. And so that's the thing. It's hard to put a good explanation out there, but I guess once you've seen enough of it, it comes to you.
I think Chris hit it right on the head. Don't get fixated on watching the leader or any other driver. Look at the whole track, because something's going on all day long around the whole racetrack. So if you get fixated on one aspect of it, you'll probably miss something somewhere else. But it's action packed, and that's why fans love coming here. It's just something going on all day long.
If you're going to Martinsville this Sunday, and you should be going to Martinsville this Sunday, get a scanner. Look for any kind of controversy. If someone knocks someone else out, but they're still in the race, put it on their put it on their channel and watch them, because they are ticked off and trying to get back to that driver. And you'll hear the spotter trying to talk them down. Hey, don't do anything stupid now. Don't. It's hysterical to watch. And then after the race, watch them confront each other. So plenty to watch.
I would say if you're at the race, before the race, if you're not watching it on TV, I always look at the pit crews and how they prepare. They practice running onto the track. So I always just try to see who's more nimble, with some communications going on, some eye rolling is happening and things of that nature. So watch the pit crews. When those guys pit, hey man, one false move and you could sink the ship.
All right, Clay, this one's specifically for you. So let me finish the whole thing, okay? In 2016, Bristol hosted a football game between Virginia Tech and Tennessee. I was lucky enough to go. It was probably the best sporting atmosphere I've ever been a part of. So come on, Clay, what are the chances of a football game in Martinsville?
Probably maybe a little higher than 0.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
We're in the racing business, so that's where we'll stick. But honestly, Bristol, they've got the scoreboard that goes over the track now. I don't think they did at that point, but we've got buildings right in the center. We've got a garage that Bristol doesn't have. So we've got so many buildings that they would have to level to even put a field in there. So yeah, it probably won't happen. And I can tell you another thing won't happen. It ain't going back to dirt.
I like that. We'll start here and work down. Chris, you mentioned North Wilkesboro. The big announcement the other month is NASCAR returning to North Wilkesboro next year for the All-Star race. Very excited. Should be a great time. Besides North Wilkesboro, what's one track you'd love to see NASCAR return to?
Well, I mean, not too many's went away. I mean, you talk about Jacksonville or you talk about some of the older tracks, but look, I mean, I'm kind of partial to short tracks, because I mean it's exciting. I mean, I call the mid tracks cookie cutters, which they've been running a little bit better this year with the new car, but the new car is made totally different, right? And I kind of laugh because Rockingham went away because of the market. SMI took away Wilkesboro because they were taking it to New Hampshire, and it was a difference of about $90 million. Not only to the track, but the industry. So there's reasons why they went away. But it's kind of circled back. It's kind of like your old clothes, right? It always comes back, the bell bottoms or the flares or whatever. Wilkesboro was really fun to be a part of, bringing it back. The racing was exciting. I'm glad they're not tearing the racetrack up. But I think, Rockingham's going to come back to a certain extent. I don't know if Cup will be there, but I think you'll see trucks or Xfiniti or something else. I don't really know. I mean, there's not been too many that's went away, since the 70s. And so, I think Clay, I mean, he's involved in it more than anybody. And, I mean, Fontana's getting ready to change. It's getting ready to go to a short track, which it needed something, right? And I know you was instrumental in some of that, and I think the ideas in that were great. But me personally, I want action. I want a little bit about them getting a little upset because somebody rubbed them wrong or whatever, because that's what we all like to see in a competitive nature. And it doesn't matter if it's NBA, football. But I think the sport has come back. I think that grassroots racing has come back, and something's changed since the pandemic. And I'm not probably a big fan of the major change in the car, because we all sit in a room, we have our opinion. I think the one lug's kind of difficult to work around. I think the actuators on the bottom and the tires. I think if NASCAR would continue to grow that and change that a little bit, I think it could be much better. And let's be honest, it needs to be much safer. I'm friends with all the drivers. I've represented them for years, and I hear a lot about what that's going on. But I just think short tracks are here to stay. I think that the sport is growing tremendously. And look, I'm glad Wilkesboro's back, not just for the community of Wilkes County, but for the competitors that hadn't had a chance to race on it now get a chance. So that's kind of how I look at it.
So actually, you have a track. And let me rephrase that. It could be past or present. Is there a track you'd love to see NASCAR run on that they're not currently running on?
Well, I got several, but we back in the late 70s, early 80s, I was driving for Speedy Thomas over in Collinsville, and we won 5 in a row at North Wilkesboro, and I was really glad to see that come back, because it was just something about that racetrack. It works, it's the pavement's 100 years old, but it's still there. Everything works. But it's been that way all over the country, because the modifieds have always run a race of champions, ever since I started. But they've moved the thing around over the country, and years ago, you had to go to Langhorne, Pennsylvania to run race champions. Then they moved it to Trenton, New Jersey, and then they went to Pocono. And we won the race of champions at the last race at Pocono, and it was on the 3/4 mile track. It wasn't on the big track, but that was always a big deal, because, the race of champions, for the years that I always ran, drew a field of like 140 race cars trying to make the field, and that was pretty big deal, but I just kind of miss those tracks that, you don't have races with that many cars coming in. It's sort of a loss, in my opinion.
Clay, you got one?
Yeah, actually, it's a semi answer. I'd like to see them run Atlanta Motor Speedway again. Now, you're saying they run Atlanta Motor Speedway now, but once SMI bought it years ago, they made it, as Chris said, a cookie cutter with the dog leg in the front stretch. I really love the oval track they had years ago. I think that was better racing than what we have now. So in a way, they're running Atlanta now, but not the track I'd like to see. I'd like to see that come back.
I'd love to see them run the oval at Indy, but my vote would go for Nashville Fairgrounds, and I think that's probably coming. So something to look forward to.
I would say I saw my grandfather race twice. I saw him race in Callaway and Hickory. So, yeah, I'd like to see some action in Hickory.
All right. Well, we're going to open it up to a couple audience questions here. Does anybody have one they're just dying to get answered here? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I tell you, there's a lot of things that a lot of people can do. One, volunteer for a team that's already out there, you local. We have racing every week in the modifieds, and they're looking for people to help, right? And to be honest with you, if you're there and you exert yourself at that level, you'll be surprised how many people move into a different series. There's some tech centers. NASCAR Institute has a tech center that if you're interested in engines or stuff of that nature, you can go to school there. Patrick Henry Community College right here has a great program. Talmadge Thomas runs it. Talmadge does a really good job. He works, with Chris Fleming and them, and it's local. I mean, you can do just different classes and stuff, but they let you build the car. I was over there 2 weeks ago and actually sat through a class just to watch the process of them. And there's a lot of people right now in these technical institutes and these local colleges have classes to do that. And I say, number one, be around your local racer and go over to the shop and volunteer to clean it up, because the next thing you'll do is be putting a tire together. Next thing you'll be doing is putting air in it. Next thing you'll be doing is things you never thought you would do. And every one of us, every one of us was around a race car somewhere along the line, or around something that we were forced to do because our parents or the people that we were there, and we learned because we were forced to, because we had to do it. And it was our way of life. You just got to make it your way of life. That's the way I look at it.
I'd like to add that whatever you choose to do, don't forget the power of yes, sir, and no, sir, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Show up first, be prepared to leave last. And like my father always says, be a sponge. All the knowledge that's around you, just soak it up every time. And if you prove that you're reliable and you're hardworking, and also you know how to hear and not hear and see and not see, because you're around grown men, you'll be elevated in the sport. You just got to dedicate yourself.
Some of the best advice I ever got was, no matter who pays your paycheck, ultimately you work for yourself. So what that means is, whatever kind of habits you develop, people see that. I used to work for a race team, BAM Racing. I was the marketing director, and then I did PR, and we had unpaid interns. Great way for people to get exposure in the sport. It didn't cost us anything. It was free help. So if there are local teams, even things like cutting their grass for them, just show them that you're willing to bust your tail to be involved. And that means something. Someone who shows up all the time and will work, believe me, you'll go places.
I really couldn't add anything more to what these guys have said, but whatever you do, just work ethic. It's hard to get good workers now. Show that you have that desire, you have that drive. If they get you sweeping the shop floor, be the best sweeper they've ever had. That's it. And they'll see that you want to go someplace, and that's what it takes. It's just basically you gotta work, and Ward said it nicely. You gotta be respectful to who you're working for. But if you show that you want to be the best at whatever you do, and work your way, like Chris said, work your way on up the ladder, you'll make
it. Did you run for Buddy? Did you ever run for Buddy?
Yeah, I finished ninth, I think, with his car.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right, we're going to take one more audience question, and then we're going to wrap this up. Does anybody else have anything? One? Flying? All right. Well, guys, I just want to say thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I know everyone enjoyed all the stories here, and thank you to New College.
All right. Thank y'all. That's all that we have for the door prizes. Thank you again for coming. Christina?
And we're back. What an event that was. We've heard some great stories. It was there at NCI. To hear, a legend such as Satch Worley talk about history, Warwick Scott talking about his grandfather, Wendell Scott, and Clay Campbell talking about the history of the track and growing up around the track along with Chris Williams. That was a one-of-a-kind event, so we're very grateful that those gentlemen came out and were a part of it. And it reminded me, Hermie, we had one of racing's greats in our suite there for the Thursday night Wheeling Modified, Paul Radford from Franklin County.
Yeah. I talked to him a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so we
were racing against him at North Wilkesboro in a late model stock car way back in the day. He had a Dodge and very, very, the firm flash, they used to call him. Yeah. Back in the day. Raced against him many times. Good guy. I enjoyed catching up with him. Talked to him about 30 minutes in the suite Thursday at Martinsville.
Yeah. And Martinsville Speedway was celebrating its 75th anniversary of its creation. So this was a very special weekend, and that was a very special panel discussion at the New College Institute on the history of racing at Martinsville Speedway. Buddy, I've enjoyed it. I appreciate it. It took a little
Have you
longer
really?
than usual. Well, most of it.
Yeah.
Except when you get under my skin. But no, I've enjoyed this podcast very much, man. And
Hey,
enjoy
Billy
all the time
Rose?
we spend. Yes, Hermie
Take a
Rose.
deep breath. It's like this.
It
Take a
didn't
deep
work.
breath.
Didn't work.
It didn't. Okay.
You got another idea?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well,
I tried.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Always tell your friends about our podcast. You can listen on all the major platforms. You can reach us at Facebook, Leaning Right and Turning Left podcast on Facebook page, SSR Racing, Sadler Stanley Racing, SSR Racing at Facebook. You can go to our website, www.sadlerstanleyracing.com, to catch up on all the other episodes. Make sure you listen to our old episodes in our library as we approach 50 episodes this year. A wonderful time I've been enjoying with my great friend and the only guy that knows me and can get under my skin, Hermie Sadler. Buddy, I appreciate the time.
It's always fun. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Come see us next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. at Hermie Sadler's Faux Show Bar and Grill in Emporia for a fun campaign kickoff. We'll all be there for that. And one more thanks to Pace-O-Matic for providing these platforms for us, SS Racing and the podcast.
That's right. I'm Virginia State Senator Hermie Sadler, and I'm leaning right.
Lord have mercy. I don't know where I'm turning. I'm turning
All right,
upside down.
All right, I'll try it again.
You got me.
All right, I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm leaning right.
And I'm aspiring state senator, former NASCAR driver, former Fox Sports Analyst, and the only one that can get under Bill Stanley's skin, Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left. How about that?
Yes, you can. Y'all have a great week. We'll talk to you next week. God bless everyone.